It's the fact that you've pretty much given me free reign to have a captive audience just to talk about whatever I want to for the next, like, I don't know, this might be like 3 hours.
All right.
Why do you think I came over early?
Yeah, let's get it on. As Miles Lane once said, let's get it on.
I'm taking you to Middle Earth, buddy.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Not just the stuff, like, we're talking about everything from the time that the world was created till the end.
Oh, yeah.
To the end of the journey, essentially.
The journey, you say?
Yes. So
Okay.
that's why I wanted you to find your most Gandalf the Grey or
Yeah, pretty close.
hobbity smoking device or anything. Yeah, I'm just excited, man.
I'm happy. If you're excited, I'm excited because I know it's going to be good.
Okay. So one of the things we have in here, just kind of starting at the beginning, most of this stuff, not until we get to the very end, isn't going to be more generally known that was covered by, like, the movies. But I'm taking you through, like, the entire like Silmarillion, creation of the universe, all that shit.
There's no movies here. This is reality. This is the world that we
The
wish we would
documentaries that have
lived
been
in.
made. No, I'm referring to the documentaries that have been made.
There we go.
Yes, documentaries. So, first, there was nothing. And then this guy named Eru Iluvatar. Now, I understand that these names probably need a lot more flourish, but I'm just going to be pronouncing them or trying to pronounce them in the way that I'm reading them. So they might sound a little trashy.
What's the language of origin?
Well, the language is essentially like, this is a divine language that I'm trying to even pronounce here. Because we're talking about essentially the god.
So a mere mortal such as yourself probably wouldn't be able to pronounce them.
Exactly.
As accurately.
Just how they're known essentially to the people on Arda, the world we're talking about here. So, Eru Iluvatar, he creates the Ainur. Smoke this, little hobbits. So, our boy Eru, he creates the... Are you okay?
Yeah, I haven't used that thing in a long time. It's a lot harder than I remember.
So he creates the Ainur, and the Ainur consist of essentially two factions, the Valar and the Maiar. And one of them, just basically think of them as like different lieutenants, like different. The Valar are actually probably a little bit more powerful than the Maiar, but both are kind of divine creations.
Okay.
So one of the Valar, his name is Melkor. He's actually like the top dog out of the Valar. And he kind of gets bored of waiting for Eru to do something. Because when he creates them, it's just a void. It's nothingness. So he's just kind of wandering around the void. He's fucking trying to kick cans over and see what's going on. And he's looking for basically this thing called the secret fire. And the secret fire essentially is what Eru has that allows him to create life. It's basically what he used to then create them. So he's like, I want to get in on this shit too. I'm looking for the secret fire. And during kind of his... wanderings, he starts to get some like rebellious ideas about how everyone should have the power to do this and whatnot. So Eru
Everybody
actually
should have the power to create?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Eru alone has this. So he has it the whole time. Melkor's looking for it. The only thing that the Valar can do, not the only thing, but basically when it comes to creation of life, they can't create it, but they can like corrupt or twist it, kind of to their will and how they want to do it. So it has to be essentially created first, and then they can kind of have their way with it. So they're all hanging out in this place called the Timeless Hall. And, sorry, the Eru kind of gets together for like a jam session, like jam band type session. He's like, we're going to sing the universe into existence. So he's like, I wrote us some music, starts passing out the sheet music. All of them start singing the universe into existence. Well, Melkor starts singing his own tune. And so, God, I got something in my throat. So he's basically kind of like singing his own music. And then some of the Ainur next to him, probably like some of the Maiar, the lower guys, they kind of see him doing his thing. And they're like, that sounds pretty good. We're going to go ahead and join in with that. So they start singing it too. And it basically becomes like a rap battle between Eru and most of the Ainur, and then Melkor and his little section. So every time Eru just kind of like smiles and then starts another verse. And then Melkor is trying to like sing his shit on top of that. Basically, he's trying to sow discord. Another verse, Eru singing his, gets everyone to go. Melkor they go back and forth a little bit. Finally, Eru just finishes and basically just does a final note and a mic drop. And basically he tells Melkor and everything, he kind of looks at him because he knows what he's trying to do. And he's like, I'm going to go ahead and keep your stuff in there. The way we just sang the universe into existence. And basically I'm going to do it to prove a point. He's like, I know you're rebellious. You're one of my creations and everything. Eru is like all knowing. He's all seeing. He's omnipotent. The Valar and the Maiar, they're brilliant in their own right and everything, but they don't see everything. They almost have like a human element about like their roles and their thought processes and stuff like that. They're able to be corrupted, and they're not.
They're independent beings.
They're independent beings, but they're not all benevolent.
Yeah.
And
everybody kind of has free will.
Mm-hmm. And so Eru kind of takes him to the side and he says, listen, I know what you're trying to do, man. And I'm gonna leave your stuff in there. I'm gonna give you your tracks on the album. Just to prove a point that my whole plan takes into account all your little plan, and it's gonna turn out my way in the end, despite what you want to do to try to mess it up. And so Melkor's secretly pissed about this, but he is like, okay, yeah, whatever. And what they sing into existence is this planet it's the world called Arda. So Melkor begs him and he's like, hey man, let me go down there for you to Arda. I'm your second. I'll make sure everything stays on the up and up. And the whole rule is once the Ainur get down there, Eru is just like, he's off in his timeless halls doing his thing. Once they go down there, he's kind of like hands off. So he allows him to go down there, but Ainur can't like go down and then just like come back. So some stay with Eru, some go down to Arda.
So Eru, father.
Yep.
Children go down, not all the children.
Nope. Okay. Some Valar, some Maiar, and everything. So
the others that sung this discord into existence on this planet?
Some of them went down.
Okay, so not just the one.
No.
Okay,
no.
Gotcha.
So there's quite a few of them that go down here. And once he gets there, he has the intention to rule and basically arrives with the other Valar and then just drops the facade and basically pulls a Captain Phillips and just is like, look at me. I'm the captain now. I'm running this shit.
It's a good move.
And Manwë is actually the lead Valar. Now, he's not as powerful as Melkor is, but basically he has all the other Valar behind him. And he's the one that Eru is like, this is our lead guy. He's the lord of like the air and the mountains and all that kind of shit. So he's pretty benevolent. Jesus. Benevolent. Gets able to go ahead and get along with everybody. He's the kind of leader you want.
Yeah.
And so he's actually Melkor's brother. They're not all brother and sister though, because some of them end up getting married. So they're not like brother and it's weird. They can do that, but it might be a Game of Thrones type like thingy.
In all creation stories, shit gets a little muddled.
Yeah, exactly. So he calls in the Ainur back up, and Melkor is like, okay, I can't handle the heat. I'm out. So he basically like leaves completely like
Melkor?
Melkor just leaves off the map. He goes out into like the void, like outside the world. Crazy thing about this is right now the world is flat. It's not a sphere. So basically what it looks like is a donut. And in the middle of the donut is a lake. In the middle of the lake is an island. So that's kind of set up for the world, so everyone can kind of understand it. The Ainur are busy spending their entire time building this world and preparing it for what they call the children of Iluvatar. And the children of Iluvatar, you'd think it would be the Ainur, because that's who he creates, but the children are actually going to be the races of men and the elves. So the Ainor's job is to come down here and basically build the world that they're going to be able to inhabit and live in and survive in.
Are the elves not human?
They're not here. Nope.
They're not human?
No, the elves are.
Oh, you just separated them out.
Well, they're completely different as far as like their cultures and their life, their physiologies. They're different species.
But they were still sung into existence.
Correct.
By Eru.
Yes.
Eru.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were a part of the first divine plan.
Yes.
Just in their own kind of
the
way.
whole reason I think he creates this world is for them.
Okay. Oh, really? Like specifically for the elves?
No. For elves and men.
Okay.
The children of Iluvatar, both children and, or both elves and men.
Okay.
So basically, while the Ainur are trying to build all this shit, Melkor just keeps popping in and fucking it up. Like they're building mountains and they're building oceans and doing all this kind of stuff, and Melkor will just sneak in, like after working they're done and just like kick shit over and like ruin mountains and everything. The size of these beings is kind of dependent on what they want to actually be at the time. I don't know if it's a thing where if they're too large and they do something, they use up all their power and then they have to rest or something like that. But these are like full on primordial beings. Like when I say they're designing a world, the land that ends up being reshaped into it is like comparable to the size of the United States, continental United States. So I'm going to use a lot of references to that to let you know geography about where stuff is happening.
Perfect.
So I can name states that where stuff is and everything. So that'll be helpful.
If you know where the states are.
If you know what the states are. So finally, word gets back to Eru that Melkor's down here just being a fuckwit and messing with all this kind of stuff. So he sends down this dude Tolkis. Now Tolkis is like the Eru version of like the god of war. He likes to fight. He's the best fighter. And when it showed like illustrations of him, think of like a Thor dude, except shirtless with tattoos all over him.
So okay, yeah.
So he
is the name Tolkis a play on maybe somebody who helped create this that was maybe trying to
that guy was the guy that actually found out about this history and then wrote it all down. I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, like maybe he wanted to insert himself.
Yeah, and he took his name, maybe
badass.
like a ghostwriter or something like that. Use the name, maybe. Right. So Tolkis comes down, Melkor sees him, Tolkis just laughs in his face and fucking Melkor runs. So after Melkor leaves, 14,363 years go by, and the Valar finally complete Arda. They're like, gloves down, dust off the hands, work is done.
God took 7 days. These guys took 14,000 years.
You know, they had someone just come. Who knows how much that guy fucked it up? And, you know, probably not 14,000 years, but they had to get it just right.
Well, yeah, they were also reconstructing Melkus's fuck up. So, okay, I see that.
So, to provide light to the world, they raised 2 lamps. Now, these, just think of like the thing that's hard to kind of grasp about this is like the enormity of stuff.
Yeah, this whole thing's.
It's proportions. It's proportions that like I don't think people have ever seen or can see. So like the pillar, just like imagine the pillar of these lamps is like larger than the largest mountain and higher than anything you've ever seen. It raises it up beyond levels you can't see, but it provides both moonlight when it's nighttime, sunlight, and they're kind of spaced far apart from each other on separate north and south of this land.
And this works because it's a donut shape. It's not
it's
a
flat.
Sphere, so there's no light and dark.
So
it's just one
light
goes
starts
off,
going out during the nighttime, the moon lights up, and that's what provides them.
Okay,
They just kind of pulse and
like street
separate.
lamps. Sort
Exactly.
Of. Okay.
Yeah. When the night one comes on, you got to get home. Your mom's gonna be calling you. So Melkor, he actually has gained some of the Maiar as his followers. They kind of like what he's doing. He's a powerful guy. He's the most powerful of all the Valar.
Yeah.
And so he's using them as spies. And one of those followers at this time is most likely Sauron.
Ooh.
And Sauron is the name that he was actually given once they discovered he was on Melkor's side and, all the evil shit. I'm trying to remember what his name was beforehand, but I can't remember. He was probably also one of the ones that sang with him. So he's using some of these guys as spies. And so after all the work is complete, how do you celebrate? Tolkis wants to get married. He was dating a nice Valar girl. I think her name is Issa. He's like, listen, we've been dating for 14,000 years. We're finally done with work. Let's get hitched. It'll be a fucking party.
Tolkien rode the whole thing out. He was just down there running defense the entire time.
Yeah, he can't go back.
Okay.
So
you said it was tough to go back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's why...
and he might have met a girl.
True. Yeah, didn't want to go back. A little summer love.
Mm-hmm. So they get married, and Tolkien's party's so goddamn hard that he falls asleep. And I'm guessing when these guys fall asleep, it's like a
slumber.
A slumber,
oh, yeah.
Yes. So at this point, Melkor returns. He comes over what they call the Walls of Night, or some shit like that. Yeah. And when he comes in, he basically just completely, like, fucks up. Well, before he starts destroying stuff, he's like, I got to have a place to, like, a safe place here so I don't have to keep bouncing off into the void.
Bolting into outer darkness, yeah.
So he builds this fortress called Utumno. And the way it describes him building this is just like he was digging into like the earth itself and basically creating like mountains in this world in Arda what are like the Alps and Everest and everything. But those are just the common mountains. They're all enormous. So he carves this fortress under this. And the fortress is, I'm trying to think of something to even describe it to. Like, you know, the mountains outside, right out there, if you were to make a fortress that spanned miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles.
Like the super jail in the second Deadpool.
More.
More?
More. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. The enormity of this mile, like...
It's like a mountain range fortress, sort of?
Imagine the fortress almost being the width of half of our city. But then, like, built into the mountain. With just like gates and towers and all this kind of stuff. He's a demigod. I mean, he's kind of a god. He can build and do all this kind of stuff. So he builds this fortress, makes sure it's locked up tight, and then he busts in and destroys the lamps. There's so much power in these lamps, basically, that when he knocks them over and destroys them, all of the like daylight lamp, I guess, caused like fire destruction, just over the whole entire planet, basically, like part of the continent. And then I think when he destroys the other one, it does something. It's because the only water was in the lake. It's got to have something to do with there was water under. Basically, what it does is it reshapes the world. All of the destruction, basically, of something so powerful that it just reshapes the world. And what it does is it basically, the best way I can describe it is it turns the whole land with that little lake in the middle, and it turns it into continental United States, with some of Canada and Alaska, where it reaches across the Bering Strait. Mm-hmm. And then the other side ends up being kind of like, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, you have, imagine Japan wasn't there, or was like closer to China. And then you have like the Korean Peninsula and all that, like China, where that's at.
So the destruction was almost like a Pangea type.
Yeah.
Okay.
World shaping event. And so the land that ends up being over where, essentially on the other side of the Pacific, where like China would be, that's going to be Amun. And that's where all the Valar end up going. They're like, we don't want to put up with this shit from fucking Melkor anymore. We're going to go and stay over here. There's going to be an ocean separating us. This isn't like these guys can just like fucking fly or anything. They still have to like travel like people. They can grow to enormous sizes, but they're not walking across an entire ocean. It takes them time. They have to travel by boat and everything, or walk.
Once they're there, they lost a little bit of their godliness.
And that's why it would take so long if they were trying to find like, when Melkor returned and was building his fortress, it's not like they just could like hear some fucking hammer and on an anvil and be like, what's Melkor up to? It's a continent.
He's got something.
It's a continent bigger than a continent because it was whole at that time. So what they do is they ended up creating, and again, the world is still flat at this point. Now it's just like spread out. And they create two trees, and they call them the two trees of Valinor. And the trees themselves are large. I'm trying to think of like size wise. Imagine a redwood, but more of like an oak, like big leaves, big span.
Like those big ass African trees.
You got to dial it up. I was going to say a redwood. Think of the biggest redwood that you're driving cars through, and then times that by maybe like 100.
It's a pretty big tree.
Yes, enormous. You're not familiar with the Star Wars universe, I'm aware, but on the Wookiee planet of Kashyyyk, it's a forest planet.
Yeah, I kind of remember.
Yes, they have trees so big that there are multiple towns within the branches of the trees. They're so far spread apart and everything. There could be cities built on the boughs and the branches of the trees.
So, when I was younger, my older cousin had an Ewok village toy from like the probably late 70s, early 80s, maybe.
It would have been like, had to have been like a little bit later in the 80s because that's when Return of the Jedi came out and that's when the Ewoks were introduced.
I played in that Ewok forest village for so long, and just thinking about that, like this sort of lays into proportion a little bit for me of like an actual, these places were they built in the trees sort of? Or was the forest separate from like where the village was?
Are you talking about the Ewoks still?
No.
This? They don't live in the two trees. The two trees are simply to replace the lamps.
Okay, so it wasn't a forest, it was just the two trees to replace the lamps.
Even if there was a forest, the forest would look like fucking grass growing up at the, like even pine trees would look like grass growing up at the roots of these trees. It's that big. They're providing the world with light.
Okay, so Melkor is still getting light from...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically at some point once they create the two trees and he sees light come on, it's basically like someone flipped on the switch and he's like, oh shit, they made something new. So the... Oh, hold on. Got to catch my place. Okay. So this is now called the Year of the Trees, once these are created.
That makes sense.
Yep. Melkor is over in Middle Earth, and all the Valar and most of the Maiar that aren't serving him are over on, basically in the west on Amen. Amen. I don't know what. So basically Melkor uses his time. He builds up strength. The Maiar that followed him, with the exception of Sauron, he basically converts them, or they convert themselves through, his sorcery, whatever he discovers, into what are called the Balrogs. If you remember in Fellowship,
The first documentary,
it shows it looks almost like a giant minotaur with flaming wings and it's on fire.
Yes.
That is a Balrog.
And that's what they
they become, yes.
Okay.
And I think he has like 4 of them. And then he also creates another fortress that is actually closer to the coast. So basically his fortress of Utumno, that is where, and now I can get into the United States reference, the continental United States. Utumno would be probably in like the Dakotas. Like...
Midwest.
Yeah. And then Angbad, this new fortress that he creates as well, is, I want to say it's larger. It is in basically Montana. Imagine it right at the border of Montana and Canada. Huge mountain range that then extends all the way up through Canada. It's at the front of this mountain range, built into the mountain. It's so big that when he is removing the earth to dig it out, it's so big that earth, when it's piled on top and all the slag from digging through all the minerals and stuff, creates 3 giant volcanoes that are on top. And his blast furnaces feed into the chambers of the volcanoes for all of his like war materials and all that kind of stuff. He digs into the mountain and creates a huge throne. Like, it's enormous. So...
This is where he's mining his resources, too.
Possibly. I mean, I assume, yeah, he's creating weapons of war and everything. He's got to arm... He really doesn't have a lot of guys that he's arming right now because he doesn't have any soldiers. We're going to get to that. So he puts Sauron in charge of Angbad. Sauron's his number 2. That's probably why he doesn't turn him into a Balrog. He doesn't want him a servant. He wants him maybe a little bit more independent to be able to do his own thing.
Same plane a little bit.
Yep. So the first elves, actually, again, they were set to wake up at a certain time, I believe. It wasn't just determined when Eru was like, everything's ready down there, and elves. I think they were set to appear at a certain place at a predetermined time, regardless of what happened down there. So technically, they were supposed to come into a world that was shaped like a donut and be whole and already ready by the Valar and all that kind of stuff. Well, the elves end up waking up in Middle Earth around this lake. And there's like maybe 2 Valar or Maiar there. And one of them, his name is Orome. Orome is the hunter. And basically, instead of going over to Amon with the rest of Valar, Orome's like, no. Melkor's going to keep creating all these crazy beasts and everything like that, or corrupting all these beasts and turning them. I'm going to hunt them down. So he just spends his time riding around and hunting these things down. And I think he has a hound with him.
Like, just for funsies, or to try to keep them from getting
a little bit of
over
both,
to
I think. I think a little bit of both with this guy.
Okay, so he's sort of a line of defense, but he's also taking pleasure in it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the elves awaken, and I think there's only 144 of them that awaken around this lake. And at kind of the same time Orome actually finds them, Melkor does. And I think Melkor might find them just a hair before, because he takes some of them and then he puts like terror into the other ones. So much so to when Orme finds them, him being also like, you know, a Valar or Maiar, they don't really trust him from the get-go. They're scared
No,
of
it's
him.
stranger danger.
So what Melkor ends up doing with some of these elves is he turns them into the orcs. Now,
My
at this
favorite
point,
historical beings, I think.
yes.
I really like orcs.
Now, about orcs, there's, you know, they're mysterious, man. No one quite knows a lot about them. And no one really knows how. There's some theories on how they might breed, which is going to become important in here when we're dealing with armies of the scope we're going to talk about. And
You mean like
there's two philosophical ways to think about this. And it's going to either make the issue heavier or it's just going to allow us to move past it and just enjoy the history of this. Either he corrupts these things, turns them into orcs, and you have both male and female, and he's basically having to force the female orcs to breed at insanely rapid rates to basically fill the ranks.
just basically breeding females to create his army?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then that would also mean that when all of them end up getting slaughtered and killed and everything like that, you're killing women and technically children, even by the good guys. So I like to, the other word on the street about how the orcs, the other word on the street about how the orcs were bred is once he discovered the life in the elves and everything like that, he found a way to twist it, but then also breed orcs through like magical means and like in like some type of sorcery in the earth. And that's why he was able to create them so quickly.
I like the first way better
Okay.
because I just picture the
It makes it that much more sinister.
well,
yeah.
And if these are breeding women, I like to think that it's like the Amazon position that they're getting impregnated. Have you ever seen the Amazon
Have you ever
position?
seen an orc though? I know the Amazon position, but some Amazons are attractive. This would not be. Can you imagine just like the sounds from like these orc fucking rape factories?
I don't think it's that way. I think they bring the
It's
orcs
gonna make
in,
it. Yeah.
and the females are the ones that are doing all the work and probably scaring the shit out of them. Like breeding may not be the best thing for these males because they're a little scared of going to breed town.
Well, basically the Valar find out what Melkor is doing to Eru's children, and they're like, "Fuck that! We're not letting this happen." So they end up coming over to Middle Earth. And when they're coming over, you would imagine they land in basically like Oregon, Washington. That's kind of the coastal area.
Pacific
like,
Northwest.
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest.
Closer to Montana, but not right on it.
Yep. So not going to, go over a ton of facts about this because there's a lot more stuff in front of it. But the Valar end up winning.
Good.
And some of them go over and start guarding the remainder of the elves. But it basically takes them a 2-year siege of Atumno.
It's a long
Even the
siege.
Valar and the Maiar. And there's no elves fighting with them right now. It's just the Valar and the Maiar that were there. So 2-year siege of Atumno. Tolkien finally fucking either breaks down the door or finds Melkor. He's hiding in one of his like lower levels and chains his ass up. Now there's a Valar named Al. It's Aule, but it's got like a flourish on the U, and I think it's Alule. Alule is like the a good comparison would be Hephaestus, like the smith of the Valar. Hephaestus would have been in the Greek pantheon. He's the one that creates all the lightning bolts for Zeus, all the weaponry.
Okay.
Hades' pitchfork. He's the one that basically builds shit.
That guy's name was Festus?
Hephaestus.
Oh, okay.
Hephaestus.
Festus is different. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So Tolkien chains his ass up with these chains that Alule made. And when Melkor gets back, they drag his ass back across they call it the Sundering Sea. Drag his ass back across, throw him in front of Manwë, and he's begging for pardon. Manwë's like, fuck your ass. So he gets 3,000 years in the halls of Mandos. And Mandos is another one of the Valar. He created the halls of Mandos. Basically, the halls of Mandos are also, I believe, where if the children of Iluvatar die, maybe just the elves, they're going to be known as the Eldar, their spirits go to the halls of Mandos. It's kind of like the afterlife, but it's inescapable without permission. So that's why they send Melkor there for 3,000 years.
Is Melkor, are they immortal or are they still mortal? So is 3,000 years like a life sentence, or is it
These guys, the Ainur, can't die.
Okay, so they are immortal. So 3,000 years isn't a lifetime. It's maybe a blink.
He
of an eye.
he just sits in there stewing and plotting his
But
revenge.
he knows there will be a release time.
Yeah.
He will get out.
Yep. So basically 3,000 years go by. And during the 3,000 years, the progress that happens kind of in Middle Earth. The elves wake up. Orome is able to convince some of them, like, hey, you guys should follow me. I want to go ahead and take you over to where you can be protected, where you should have been protected anyway had this continent been whole. And we're going to take you over to Amon, and you can live with the Valar. So over time, he ends up getting them across. Basically, he takes them from the place where they end up coming together or like being created is... Shit, man, it's like in what I would consider like not the Virginias, the Carolinas. It's close to like the farther east. There's lands a little bit further to the east, but there's no maps or anything.
But they were across the sea from...
Yeah, and I mean, they got across the whole continent. Okay. So Orome
They got across the continent, or they got across the sea and then the continent?
They got across the whole continent, because they're over in like the Carolinas. So they got across all the way to the west, and then hop a boat in the west and take it over to Amon.
So they were going like... through the Pacific Ocean.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So they were crossing over Melkor's area?
He wasn't there anymore, but when they were actually like taking him out of Utumo, which they leveled after they got him out of there, they didn't find Sauron or the Balrogs. So they went ahead and hid, and they were probably hiding at Angband, where Sauron was. So he still has guys there that are waiting, that are building up strength, that are still there to do his bidding. And they're expecting him to get out at some point. 3,000 years is nothing.
Yeah.
They didn't know how long he was going to be in there, but they'll wait for as long as they have to.
This sounds like a Saddam Hussein situation.
You got it.
They took him away, they leveled his palace, but his sons were still kind of on the loose and could potentially start causing some shit.
Yeah, so after 3,000 years, he's like, hey, I don't know if he knocks on the door of the Halls of Mandos. He's like, hey, I kind of want to talk to Manwë. Can I talk to him? I'm sorry. Gets in front of Manwë and is like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Basically spills his, let me out, please. I'll be good. I'll be good.
I want to be a better man for you.
Manwë's like, hey, bro, I don't know if you had a rough or anything like that, but we'll go and let you out. But you're on probation in Amon. You can't leave. Can't go back to Middle Earth.
You're on house arrest.
Yep.
We're putting a tracking bracelet on your ankle.
He's got it around his ankle. So what he ends up deciding to do is he's like, well, shit. By the time he gets out, Orome has already brought over like 3 different groups of elves. Now, even though there were 144, I don't know how many Melkor originally took, but because there has been so much time, as they've been traveling, they've also been setting up some establishments. Some of them, a couple of them stayed in areas, but then grew their population. Elves just breed like normal.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta stick it in to get something out.
Grandpa style.
Yep.
Okay.
So they eventually, during Melkor's incarceration, they get 3 groups of elves to end up coming over. Orome gets them over to Cali. They get picked up somewhere in the Los Angeles area. He shuttles them over. In order to shuttle them over, he asks for the Valar of the Ocean. His name is Olma or Olum. I'll end up getting to it on one of these flashcards later. They're like, hey, we got a lot of people that need to come over. So he's like, let me send my island. So he drives an island over, loads a whole bunch of them up. At this point, like, some of the elves stay in let's call it on the west or east side of the Missouri. Some of them make it over. There's a mountain range that I would say where the Missouri River is, and that's called the Misty Mountains. It's enormous. It was raised by Melkor specifically to try to keep Orome kind of like to impede his travels.
Okay.
It's enormous. There's a pass, though, a couple passes, though, through it. And so he has to lead them through that. Then he has to lead them over another mountain range, I think, called the Blue Mountains. He's losing elves, not like just because they're wanting to settle in places. It's like, ooh, what's that over there? And then a group will go break off. And then by the time he gets back, he turns around, he looks, and he's like, where did the fucking half of them go? He ends up getting there with 3 groups. One of them ends up being called the Noldor. One of them is the Freyar or something like that. I'll get to the actual name. So pardon me if I'm getting this. There's a lot of names to remember.
You could be making half these up, and I'd have no idea.
And another one are the Tesseri, and they're like the ocean-going ones. So once Orome gets them on the island, shuttles them back over to Amon, the ones that like the ocean, they go through like a little chain of islands right off the coast, and they're like, ooh, we like this. Drop us off here. We like to build ships and shit. So they drop them off there. They bring another group in. They get them closer to Amon, get them onto land and everything. And basically, there's one group that's like, we're going to stay here and build a city. And then there's a group called the Noldor. And they're like, we're going to build this city too. So they allow them to establish cities. They're going to basically have them live there. They want them to live there.
Elf cities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure the Valar and the Maiar have to have cities, but they let them build their own cities. They're going to be smaller in scale for them and everything. Thing about the elves too is the elves are also immortal. Okay.
Yeah.
They age, but I think they get to a certain age, like prime adulthood, and then they stop aging.
Prime adulthood's probably like 10,000 years. 5,000 years, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're probably 5,000 would probably be good.
Okay.
They might get up to adulthood a little faster, but then between like your 20s and to your 40,
Yeah.
you probably stop at 40, I would imagine, just based on graphics renderings I've seen.
Thousands the new 100 kind
Yeah,
of deal.
exactly. Still looking good. Everything's tight.
All right.
Elves always seem to keep it tight. I have not seen an out of shape elf.
Except for their feet. Just bad feet.
I think you're thinking of someone else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the elves I think are like top to bottom, like pretty good.
Okay.
So they end up building their cities and everything. And once Melkor gets out, he's like, not a lot to do around here. He's like, I'm going to see if I can fuck with these elves. So he's trying to corrupt these elves. Well, he has this plan that he's been thinking up for the last 3,000 years. And after he gets out, he looks at the groups of elves and he's like, the ones that sail, he's like, they're kind of weak. They're not going to serve my purpose. Looks at the other ones and he's like, they're a little harder to get in with. They're a little less trusting. But the Noldor, they love to learn. They wanted to learn from any of the Valar or the Ainur that they possibly could. Some of them were taught by Alul for like smithing and stuff like that. Melkor came in. He's like, I can give you guys some information on stuff. I'm pretty powerful. I made some mistakes, but hey, learn from me.
You know, some of those passes that you guys took to get here, I was the one that made those.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and start with the dude, and his name is Fëanor. I'm going to zero in on a couple of these historical figures, but there's going to be a lot of names I'm going to throw at you, so just have me stop if you want me to try to explain who they come from. But because the elves are immortal, their lineages, they have children, but these characters are in play for thousands of years, some of them. So basically, the Noldor, they're first taught how to smith by Alul, and there was this one guy, his name was Finwë. And Finwë, he's the half-brother. Oh, sorry. Finwë, he has a kid with this elf, this hot lady elf.
Jeez. Hot lady elf.
Lady elf. And I didn't write her name down because I think she ends up dying right after the birth of, after Finwë, she gives birth to Fëanor, and then she passes. Finwë's a man about town. He gives it a reasonable amount of time, probably 100 years or so, and then he's like, time for me to move on. And so
sowed my wild oats.
Yeah, and so he ends up settling down with a lady, and he has a few more kids, and he has another kid named Fingolfin, and then Finarfin.
Bad at naming.
Maybe it's just they just want to keep it close, so maybe they can just say Finn, and it applies to both the kids. I'm not sure. So these are the half brothers of Fëanor. Fëanor is like obsessed with building shit. He wants to be the greatest smith. He learns from Alul, and then he also learns from Melkor as well. He lets Melkor teach him some shit. He's so good. He's known essentially as the greatest smith outside of the Ainur ever. So he creates these things, and they're called the Silmarils. That's where we get the historical name for the textbook, the Silmarillion.
Okay.
Okay. The Silmarils are basically these three, like, circular gems, and I want to say they're probably about the size of, like, a baseball. And he basically crafts them and then is able to fill them with the light of the two trees. Through some type of means. This is, like, divine type of, like, stuff. I think he has one of the Maiar or the Ainur help him fill it up.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, my mic's on.
Okay.
Are you not getting me?
It's just not picking up through the headphones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, looks like it's on.
Okay.
So he crafts these Silmarils, and the elves are basically just like people. Some of them are jealous, some of them are greedy, some of them are cocky. They have all their faults and everything.
Yeah, they're human, or
they have
mortal.
But they have human emotions and everything.
Maybe that's the best way to describe it.
So during this time he's creating these, Melkor keeps kind of sowing lies among the Noldor and everything. And he kind of is not turning them against the Valar, but he's dropping little breadcrumbs about like how they're really the ones in charge, and why did they take Middle Earth away from the elves and everything like that and force them to come over here. Just little snippets of like, maybe you should be disgruntled about this. I've been to Middle Earth. It's pretty cool. You guys should have stayed there and checked it out.
He's got a little civil rights kind of going on.
Well, Fëanor also becomes so obsessed with his work, like these Cimmerals that he makes, that he thinks that his half-brother actually wants them, and basically threatens him with a sword. And the Valar like, fucking ease up, dude. Like that's not cool here. He wasn't trying to steal your shit. And so they actually exile him to this place called Formenos. And it's just another city that's outside of the main Noldor elf city. He's like, and Finwë is like, I feel bad. Like my kid lost his mom. Now he's getting exiled. He goes with him. Yeah. So he goes with him. Well, Melkor is like, man, they're shafting you. So he shows up in Formenos, knocks on the door, and he's like, hey, Fëanor, what's going on, man? I'm here to see how you're doing. He's like, fuck you. He's like, I know that you had something to do with this. You're whispering all that shit in my ear. You made me crazy about my fucking jewels. He's like, get the fuck out of here. I want nothing to do with you. So he ends up leaving, and basically Melkor kind of goes south and is just wandering around. He's still trying to find a way to enact his plan. It hasn't worked out with the elves and everything. And he runs into this creature, basically this dark creature that probably came in at some point into the world and existed in the world due to the discourse that they sang into the world. And the creature's name is Ungoliath. And basically her preferred shape, she's a shapeshifter, but she always tries to take the shape of like a giant spider. Enormous spider.
Scariest thing possible. Yeah, why wouldn't you try to take that shape?
The sports complex down there?
That big?
Yes. She would span the entire width of that sports complex with her legs. She's enormous. She's bigger than Melkor.
Nothing like the one in the Wild Wild West. We're talking super spider.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Just a evil creature that takes the form of a spider. So he convinces her because she wants power. He's like, I know a place. They got these trees. And if you come with me, we could probably knock these things out and you could take all the light out of them and drink them. And she's like, ooh, that sounds fucking good. And so she's a little wary. She's like, I don't think I can take on the Valar, though. And he's like, listen, he's like, I got you. I know how to sneak in there. We'll go in and do that. So it's a night in which I think like they're distracted by something. There's like a celebration or something like that. And basically Melkor and Ungoliath sneak around. The trees are visible from the main Noldor city, like their capital city. You can see them way, way in the distance because they're so huge. But basically Melkor goes up to him and like stabs into the tree, and all of like the golden sap and light sap is coming out of it. And Ungoliath just drinks all of it, grabs up on the tree and just sinks her teeth into it and starts drinking all of it. As she's drinking this, she's growing larger.
And more powerful.
And she's injecting the venom into the trees so they can't be rescued either. So the trees essentially become infected and they go dark and the light's gone from the land. And as they do this, basically he's like, no, we got to fucking book it. Let's get out of here. So I mentioned earlier, like Alaska and the Bering Strait and everything.
Strait, yep.
You know how there used to be that land bridge there that actually existed? Up in the very, very north, there is a land bridge that goes from Aman way up around and then comes way back down through Middle Earth, kind of like how Alaska can come down through Canada and into like Washington.
Okay.
So on his way up there, because Formenos is north of where the trees were, he stops by Formenos, knocks on the door. Finwë answers. This isn't really how it happened, but this is how I envision it happening. Finwë answers the door. Melkor's like, surprise bitch, and knifes him, and kills him. He's like, I've come for the Cimmerals. Takes him, grabs a whole bunch of his other jewels, all of Fëanor's works that he had and everything, because of course he's not just crafting those, he's crafting other shit.
Yeah.
Takes all of that shit, and him and Ungoliath book it across this land bridge. And it takes them a long time because of course they're walking and everything. So finally they end up getting over to what I would say would be probably like right where Canada meets Washington. He's still quite a ways away from that Montana fortress and everything. And as soon as they get over there, Ungoliath's like, hey, it looks like we're out of trouble. Fucking dump the stash and let's see what we got. And Melkor's like, okay. She's like, you promised me shit. And he's like, okay. She's huge by this point. She's more powerful than he is.
He's probably smart to listen.
So yeah, so you know the deal where you put the good shit in your back pocket and then you dump out all the other stuff. And he's like, "This is what we got and everything." And she's like, "Oh yeah," and she's eating all of the fucking gems and everything. She's grown larger, and she's like, "Where's the Cimmerals?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Give them to me." He's like, "Yeah, those are gonna be mine." She fucking like webs him up and traps him and starts squeezing him, and she's gonna kill him. So he screams out in pain. Balrog buddies hear it. And so they fucking jump on the quick and nasty and get to him and are able to get to him before she kills him and like scare her away with like their flaming swords and like fire whips and everything.
And the fact that probably strengthened numbers there.
Oh yeah, I mean she couldn't defeat all of them.
But she could take one, but she couldn't take
She could have taken Melkor. She would have killed him.
But the Cimmerals?
He kept them. He was able to keep them.
What were the Balcor? The Balcor that came up. They came up in
Balrog.
numbers.
Balrog.
Balrog.
Yeah.
They
like
came
the,
up in
like
big
the fighter on
numbers.
Street Fighter.
Okay.
Yeah, they end up coming across from the Montana area quickly. You know, they're beings. They can still move pretty quick. And, or like divine beings or whatever. And basically scare her off. She goes and she ends up setting up shop after she gets scared away. Let's say she sets up shop, I want to say, in like Wyoming.
So right next door, but there's still some
South Wyoming.
some
Maybe
space.
right where it's getting ready to meet Nebraska. If those touch, do those touch?
I think Wyoming and Nebraska do.
Okay, so right in that
Maybe.
area, there's a mountain range. She ends up taking shelter, and it actually becomes kind of a haunted place because she starts actually breeding other spiders and everything. So that kind of, the forest around there becomes kind of like a place you don't go. It's like an evil place. So, yeah, the Balrogs come in, and after he gets back to Aimbad, he's like, "I'm fucking back. Boss is back in town." He mounts the 3 Cimmerals on his crown, and what this basically does is after Fëanor discovers what happened, after, crisis of the 2 trees going out, Fëanor gets back to Formanos. They know who did this. I mean, there's only one being that's able to do this stuff.
Things were probably pretty peaceful when Melkor was locked up, but now things are starting to go awry after he's been let out.
Oh, yeah. It didn't take him long to fuck it up either. So Fëanor gets back, finds out all his shit's gone, and basically the Valar are like, "Hey, that sucks, man. But you can always..." Well, he can't make new ones because the trees are gone. They can't just recreate the trees. Yeah. It took them a lot of power to do it. So, and of course, they're on the ground. They can be killed again. So they're like, "We'll scratch off that idea. Lamps don't work. Trees don't work." Fëanor's like, "So you're just going to let him get away with it? That's still the only remaining light from these trees is in those things. We should go get them back." And they're like, "Nah, we're still good over here. We're safe over here. We're just not going to let him come back. We'll make sure that
they don't have any light.
Huh?
They don't have any light.
I'll get to it.
Okay.
They still they'll rework some shit.
Okay.
So Fëanor's like, no, we're not doing this. Fëanor has like 7 or 8 sons, maybe even a little bit more at this time. And so he's like, we're not letting this shit stand. So he goes against the Valar, and he's like, "We're going to get this shit back and take this guy down. I'm going to get my shit back that I worked on."
Mob rules.
Yeah. So kind of against the Valar's wishes, they don't want him to do it. They're like, we're not responsible for what you do. We're not going to come help you or any of that shit. Like, this is you. We're telling you not to do this kind of stuff. You weren't created for this. Well, he has to find a way to get across for him and all of his, sons. And basically he has this Noldor army that's going to follow him too. Because he's basically their king.
Now he's got some numbers.
Now that Finway's gone. Finway was the High Lord of them.
But since he got stabbed and the Cimmerals got stolen from him.
Yep, it passes down to Fëanor. So he's, as their king, he's like, "We're going to fucking war." Well, the people that own the boats, the Tesseri, they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to let you borrow boats. The Valar don't want to do that. We're not going to get on their bad side." He's like, "Give me the fucking boats or we're going to kill you." So he ends up killing a bunch of these guys and stealing their boats. So now the Valar are like, "Fuck, dude, you're killing like your own people and taking these boats." They haul ass over. They land in, I want to say probably Washington or Oregon, and they set up a camp. Don't even build a city or anything like that. He's like, "We're going straight at him." So Fëanor basically, as soon as they land, Fëanor, as soon as they land, he's like, "By the way, there is no trip home," and he sets the boats on fire.
That seems
burns
very short-sighted.
burns all the ships. Now at the same time, there is another force like coming over that is actually Noldor as well, and I want to say it is his half brother. So Fingolfin and the Northern elves, they're actually coming across. They missed the boats, but they're coming across that big land bridge too to support him. And as they're on the land bridge, the fire from the boats is so big they can see the light in the sky. And Fingolfin is like, "This dude just fucking burned our boats. We can't get home
Unless we walk the land bridge.
unless we walk." And he's already lost a bunch of his people walking. It's like it's the tundra.
Yeah, it's a trek through.
It's like walking through the
cold.
Arctic. It's not. Yeah, no, it's not friendly. And so Fingolfin, during this time, after they start to move in there, he's like, "I'm gonna actually head back." So I think Fingolfin actually heads back, but still a bunch of like even his sons say they're like, "We're gonna keep going." And I don't know if it was at this time or it was after the events that are about to happen, but all of Feanor's sons basically take an oath, and it's basically the oath of Feanor. And it's like, regardless of who stands in our way, the oath is we're getting the Silmarils back by any means. Doesn't matter who's holding them. It doesn't matter if they're friendly and they don't give them up. We're getting them back. So when Feanor gets there, Morgoth Melkor, at this point, once they determine he killed the trees, he goes by a new name now. They give him a new name, and it's supposed to be like a sinister name, and it's Morgoth. So I'm going to start using Morgoth now.
Assumed identity.
Hell yeah. So he reinvents himself. He's now the Lord of Middle Earth.
Morgoth.
Yes. So the area that all of this is going to happen in, and this is basically what's called like what's going to be called the years of the sun. It's during this time that they figure out a way to do light for the world. And they're like, we're just going to do a sun and a moon. That way he can't touch them and he can't fuck them up. So they create the sun and the moon.
They're suspended outside the planet. He can't get to them. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure why I don't just maybe you didn't expect it to get messed up. You didn't expect the lamps to fail or the trees to get poisoned by a giant spider. Let's just go with something in space.
Screw in some light bulbs.
Mm-hmm. So let's see where we at. Okay, so Feanor gets there, and Morgoth actually finds out that they're landing, so he sends a force out to fight them. At this point, because he's had all that time where he's corrupted some of the elves, basically he has like an army that's waiting for him, because Sauron's also been like, breeding the orcs and creating his force.
Beefing up.
Yep. Consolidating power. And he sends out the orcs to meet Feanor's troops. Feanor is basically pissed off beyond belief and just plows through them and just charges straight up to the gates of Angband. And he ends up within sight of the gates. He gets so far out ahead of his main army that it's just like him and his like elite guard. They get there, and as they get to Angband, Morgoth sends out the Balrogs. They surround him, kill all of his men, and then they end up mortally wounding Feanor.
Little bit of an Achilles type situation.
Yeah, he just got ahead of himself. He didn't have his force. Well, what happens is after he falls, before they're able to deal, he's mortally wounded, but before they're able to cut off his head or just like the killing blow, his sons come in, fight him off, and get his father's body out.
Good.
Well, I don't know. This guy started a whole bunch of shit, so I don't know how.
He did, but he had good means. I don't know. I guess maybe if you can just create another sun and a moon, but you also still want the Silmarils back, so I don't know.
Well, and after this happens too, one of his sons, his name is Maedhros. For some reason, he goes to Morgoth for some type of like parlay or like discussion, and Morgoth is like, "Fuck you!" So he captures him and chains his ass to like the cliffs of one of the volcanoes by his hand, and he can't get loose.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is the rest of the Noldor elves, they actually arrive in Middle Earth, and basically kind of under instruction from Ulmo, he's that sea god that I was talking about. Two of these guys, his name is Turgon, and he's actually one of the sons of Fingolfin, which is the half-brother of Feanor, and then Finrod, who he's the son of Finarfin, so the other half-brother. So This is what I'm going to tell you right now. The names are going to start getting, and
Less
that's why I
questions is gonna be
honestly I
better
skipped
here.
over a ton of the names. I just need to name these guys because they're main characters that come in,
Okay.
or they're the sires of other people that come into play. So he's like, listen, like you guys aren't going to, get yourselves ready for a fucking war. This isn't just you guys coming in and beating him. So you guys need to go create essentially like refuges for like the elves and everything. So he sends Turgon. He ends up creating this place called Gondolin, and after looking around basically what we're talking about is the continental United States. He finds this place and he's led to it, and it is think of it as probably in Colorado, and it's a giant circle of just sheer mountains and cliffs that protects this enormous valley, and there's like a secret valley that you have to go through in a tunnel to get to it. He finds that and he keeps it secret. He sends his people and he's like, you guys establish like a town here, I'll be back. He goes in there, takes some people with him, finds out it's safe, finds a safe route to it, and then ends up bringing all his people into this city, and they build this enormous city called Gondolin.
Within the natural protection of the mountain range.
And it stays secret for the longest time. People don't go out. People, don't. He sends out scouting parties, but everyone's super like no one finds it. And then Finrod ends up going a little bit further south, and I think he ends up like imagine where like Lake Tahoe would be. Lake Tahoe, there's a giant river there, and he finds this giant mountain, and he basically carves a fortress into the mountain, and it's called Nargothrond. So at this point, Maedhros is still chained to the volcano, and this guy named Fingon, he's the son of Fingolfin.
Yeah.
He hops a ride on this giant eagle. There's giant eagles.
Sweet.
Here.
Okay.
Hops a ride on a giant eagle and basically flies to the volcano, jumps onto the side of the volcano, and is like, I'm getting you out of here. And he's like, and Maedhros is like, just fucking kill me. He's like, nope. And he hacks off his hand, and he's like, you're getting out of here. Brings him back. And technically, Maedhros should have been the next High King because he was the son of Fëanor was the High King. And he's like, yeah, I got myself caught. I kind of fucked up. I don't think I should be the High King. And so he's actually past it. He's like, tell your dad, Fingolfin, he's going to be the High King. So Fingolfin actually becomes the High King of the Noldor. Morgoth.
So where did the one-handed man end up?
He ends up going over to... So it'll help if I kind of paint the geography for you, this area.
Okay.
So Montana, border of Colorado, that's where Angband is. Now imagine the rest of Montana as a giant plain. And then around that border where Montana is, all the way from the Pacific Northwest, wrapping all the way around to probably like Ohio, is basically kind of a mountain range that encloses this giant plain.
Okay.
Maedhros goes and creates a fortress over in, I'd say like, maybe Indiana, Iowa.
So it was a little further east.
Yeah, and so they're kind of creating these refuges and fortresses kind of to watch over this plain facing toward Morgoth. Because if he sends people out, they want to be able to...
They got to keep an eye on the bad guy.
Exactly, they want to be able to stop him. And, all right, hold on. I'm holding too many cue cards here. Morgoth basically sees them consolidating power, and he's like, I got to kind of stop them before they get a foothold here. They're going to be a pain in my ass for a while. So he actually attacks the armies of Fingolfin and Maedhros and actually beats them. And they get beat, but at the same time, they weaken him enough to where he's not able to then push forward and conquer, basically move south. And what they do is they create basically, like within that plain in Montana, like fortresses or watchtowers, just to get a little bit closer look to watch what's going on in Angband. And if he sends out small raiding parties, they can cut them off before they get to like the main elf settlements and everything.
Okay, so they're just kind of like scouting parties, kind of like fire, like you put up fire towers or whatever they are.
Yeah, but they're manned and everything. But I mean, it's not like cities. It's basically like watchtowers and outposts.
Outposts, yeah.
Kind of around this time in the very far east, back to kind of where we were talking, like imagine there's a little bit more land on our east coast. Stretches out a little bit further. That's where the first men awake. So men actually kind of awake during this time.
All this is going on. Well, I guess there wouldn't be any men yet.
No, not yet. So they awake at this time. And after kind of getting their bearings, they start working their way west as well. And after a while, they end up coming over the Blue Mountains, which would be, let's just call them the Rocky Mountains. They come over the Rocky Mountains. Do the Rocky Mountains extend all the way down to like New Mexico
Yeah,
and Arizona?
I think
Okay,
so.
perfect. Then that's the perfect analogy. They come over and they're in this whole land that it's taking place of, which would be California, Nevada, everything west of the Rocky Mountains is called, it's called Bella. For some reason, I always have trouble pronouncing this, and then once I hear it, I realize how much of an idiot I am. It's called Beleriand. So that's what that area is called, that entire from north to south, from Canada's border down to, where it touches the Mexican border, Beleriand.
The
on
West
Rockies.
Coast.
Yes, exactly. So they end up eventually making their way over that into Beleriand. Well, while they're doing what they consider the siege of Angbad, it's not a siege, it's like they're just looking after it. Morgoth's not even there. He's actually discovers men have awakened, and he's like, these motherfuckers are going to be so much easier to corrupt than
Oh yeah,
than
and we are.
than the elves. Not only because like the difference between, of course, the big difference between elves and men is one is immortal and the other one have a shelf life of like 100 years. Even in this, regular men, shelf life of 100 years. So Melkor is able to actually corrupt some of them. And he basically kind of drops some information in their ears to get them to turn to his side. He's like, why do you guys only get to live for 100 years? Like, the Valar must have cursed you guys or something like that, because you guys don't die willingly. You guys, age takes you. Like, you get to die unwillingly. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Little Satan style.
Yeah, and he's like, we should do something about that. Come follow me, and we'll see if we can do something about that. Like, sounds good. Well, some of the other men, they actually end up leaving and working their way to try to get closer to the Valar, and end up coming into Beleriand. The first leader of the men, his name is Beor, and the men are known as the Edine. So he's leading the Edine. He ends up coming in and he leads the first house of men into Beleriand over the Blue Mountains. So men have actually officially entered the playing field. They're on the chessboard now. All right, we're moving on, buddy. What do you got so far? You got any questions about?
A lot of stuff going on.
All right.
Feels very biblical, but in a much more interesting sense. Like there's parallels that you can draw between, but the mysticism of this just seems so much more enthralling.
So there's a period, essentially what they call the Long Peace, and it's almost like 200 years where not a lot of shit happens. Again, even though Morgoth was technically victorious, he lost so many of his people that he couldn't make war. He couldn't conquer anything. And there was still a bunch more elves, and now men coming into the picture farther south. So if he pushes too far without the troops, he's going to end up getting beat. The big thing, too, that I don't think the elves didn't realize is that they actually couldn't beat Morgoth, because even if they destroyed him, he's a spirit. Like, they were just trying to, I think, get him off the board. I don't really, Fëanor tried to charge him to try to beat him, like, with, like, 50 guys. Like, I think they kind of underestimate, like, how powerful this dude is. He can, like, move mountains and shit.
Well, and through everything that he's gone through, he's still become victorious. Like, he's still around.
Yeah, it's not like he's not strategic.
Yeah. He's got some war medals, for sure.
Yeah. So some of the men come in, they end up meeting some of the elves. They're friendly to him. They're not threatened by him or anything like that. And so they actually help some of the men. They figure out, they're like, oh shit, like more allies. So they help some of them settle in kind of like Oregon, Washington. And that's like where the house of like Beor ends up settling. There's like a mountain range there and it's kind of protected. And it's like, hey, fantastic. We have someone kind of watching what you consider like your left flank or something like that. We don't have to spread ourselves so
Good
thin.
positioning.
Yeah, exactly.
But the humans, you said, were corrupted by...
Some. Kind of in the same way that the elves were.
Okay.
Only
So,
some of the humans went with Melkor. Some of them stayed over on the East Coast, kind of established themselves there. Same thing with the elves. Some of them stayed along the way and kind of established other areas and everything. Around this time, too, we're going to introduce the third and final race. Maybe not final, because there are a couple other ones, but the main one in our story is the dwarves. So the dwarves actually come into being. They weren't actually planned as any of this. They weren't any of the children of Ilúvatar or anything.
Were the dwarves the mixed race between
No.
the humans and the elves? Okay.
So Alul, he ended up getting kind of bored at some point. And he was like, fuck, he's like, I've been building so many cool things. He's like, I could build some cool ass people. And so he's like, what don't we have yet? He's like, we got elves who are like super graceful and smart and everything, and we got men who are kind of like a little more rugged and have to enjoy life more because they have shorter lifespans. He's like, let's create something maybe a little bit in the middle, but let's make them like hardy and shit. And he ends up also kind of designing them to withstand Morgoth. He's like, I'm going to make them kind of hard to corrupt because I've kind of noticed something about these guys we've already made is that they're kind of susceptible to fuckery.
They're pretty easily tempted.
So he creates 7 or 8 stone statues of dwarves, but he can't give life to them. And so Eru comes down. He's like, hey, buddy, what you doing? And he's like, nothing. He's like, looks like you're creating some people. And he's like, no, I was just fooling around. He's like, I'm going to need you to probably smash those. You know, I'm the only one that creates people around here. And Aliel's like, fine. And he gets ready to smash them. And then Eru is like, just fucking kidding with you. They can live. And so he ends up, as he's getting ready to smash them, he brings them to life. And like the dwarf's like, no. And he stops. So these dwarves are essentially like the fathers of all the dwarves. Dwarves are excellent craftsmen. They're the creation of essentially the craftsmen of the gods. They love digging for treasure and all that kind of stuff. They make great fortresses, like all that kind of stuff.
Wonderful underground.
They're just fucking sturdy as fuck, like both of body and mind. So they're kind of in the play. They actually have a fortress called Nargarost or something like that in the Blue Mountains. So they're a little bit more to the west of where that Magdros guy is. So they're kind of like they're at the border of Beleriand where it meets with Middle Earth, basically.
So we're Middle Earth and the human population come together.
Kind of come over. They come over the Blue Mountains.
Okay.
At a certain point. So the long piece lasts until what's considered year 455 of the years of the sun, which we're now in. And Morgoth is basically like, all right. He's like, I've been up to some shit in my fortress. I've been building up my base. I got my troops and everything like that. It's time to see if I can go and conquer this bitch. So one night he basically, I'm trying to think of how to describe this. He sends forth rivers of fire. And basically what he does is he forces like the volcanoes and everything like that to explode and cover this entire area of what we would consider Montana. I'm trying to remember what the name of the plane was. But he covers this whole thing in fire, sends it out, and basically uses that to clear all the elves out. Or torch them if they're going to stay. And behind that, he basically sends out his Balrogs. And he's been busy because he's actually managed to create a dragon.
That sounds pretty busy.
Yeah, so it's basically his dragon that he first creates. His name is Glaurung, and he can talk and shit. I mean, he's like a sentient being, but he's flightless. He doesn't have wings. Basically like a giant Komodo dragon or monitor lizard that can fucking breathe fire. And sends out that and all these orcs he's actually created. And they're Eldar and the men are completely caught off guard by it. So they're trying to kind of beat them back and everything. And like the main guys, there's a guy named Finrod that comes out. He's related to either Fingolfin or the other guy. I can't remember exactly what his relation is, but he's one of the heroes or one of the leaders of the elves. He ends up getting saved by this guy. He's a man. His name is Barahir. And Finrod, in thanks for it, actually gives him a ring. And he's like, this ring will actually help you in your fight. It'll be an heirloom and it'll help protect your family. This ring is going to actually come into play much later in the story because this ring gets handed down as almost a sign of the royal lineage of men. And it survives throughout this whole entire thing. So this is where it actually comes from, is Finrod actually. It's like a token of esteem between elves and men. Catch my breath.
So this ring would be maybe made in like a series of rings?
Nope.
No?
Nope. Rings were still made before the rings we're thinking about.
Okay.
So this ring was probably made over in Valinor, where the Valar are. They call it Valinor at some point, so I'll probably just start referring to that instead of Amen or whatever. Over in Valinor, stuff that was made over there is made by divine beings and all their crafts. So I mean, it's super special. So he gives them this ring, and basically what the ring is it's got a green jewel in it, and then it's got like it almost looks like two serpents, and they're kind of like biting one another. I'm not sure what the significance of it is, but... So after this, Morgoth controls the entire north. So he controls the Pacific Northwest, Montana, all the way over to what would be considered the Dakotas and Wisconsin and Michigan and all that kind of stuff. He controls that area.
He's got the humans up there. Yes.
He drives them back, but at the same time, too, he's, I'm assuming, taking as many prisoners as he can between elves and humans and corrupting them into orcs or humans in his service or whatnot. I'm sure he can find a place for corrupted humans. He already has a gang of them that he's already using. Fingolfin, because he sees all of this shit happen, and he sees basically all of his people getting killed across this entire thing, he's like, fuck this. And he just fucking rides his horse straight through the enemy, all the way across what we would consider the plain of Montana to the gates of Angbad.
Just plowing through till he got there?
Yes. And basically rides up there and challenges Morgoth. He's like, get your ass out here. Let's fucking settle this. And Morgoth comes out, and Morgoth at this point, I think kind of the general consensus is that he's around 40 feet tall.
Jesus.
And Fingolfin, some of the elves would be, larger than some humans. So he was maybe around like 8 feet, maybe 9. Some of the like super high elves were a little bit taller. And so he's got a shield and his sword. And I think Morgoth has basically a giant fucking mace, and he calls it Grond. And so he comes out and he's like, yeah, let's do this. And during this fight, Fingolfin is so fast that he's able to dodge these attacks. And as he's thrown this mace into the ground, it's leaving like these pits of fire where it hits. So Fingolfin is dodging those, and he ends up wounding Morgoth 7 times. But, he's fighting a fucking god, basically. And he's
7 spots on a 40-foot tall being.
Yeah. And so finally he tires. I think he ends up misstepping and steps back into one of the pits. And as he's doing that, Morgoth brings his foot down on him and crushes him. And so there's his name is Thorondor. I was mentioning the eagles earlier. So there's these giant eagles that reside in, why can't I remember this? Bella, what did I call it? Beleriand.
Where the humans are?
Yes. The whole country that they're in right now.
Okay,
yeah.
That area.
Yeah, so there's a huge group of eagles that live in Beleriand, and they came over from Valinor. They're like, I'm trying to think of, 747 would be a good size for these eagles.
Big old birds.
Yeah, you can ride on the top of them easy. So he ends up coming in, and he was friends with Fingolfin. These birds are sentient. They can talk. They're smart as shit. And so he ends up coming in as Morgoth is getting ready to either defile, because he's going to defile the shit out of his body. He comes in and claws the shit out of Morgoth's face and grabs Fingolfin's body and fucking books it out of there. So now...
Dead body.
Yes, dead body.
Okay.
So he's dead. So now Fingon, who he ends up becoming the High King of the Noldor. He was Fingolfin's son. And I think he was also the one that came and rescued Maedhros and got him off there.
So Fingolfin was the one that took over for the fellow that got strapped to the side of the mountain. So his son now assumes the High King.
The line now goes to that.
Okay.
It doesn't revert back to Feanor's line. It stays in Fingolfin's line. So during this time, because now Morgoth pretty much has the whole north, he sends Sauron, and he's like, hey, go ahead and just like snag a fortress somewhere around here. So he goes and sets up shop probably, I would imagine, somewhere where Idaho meets Nevada. There's a river, there's a fortress, and it's on an island in a lake, and it's called Minas Tirith.
Starting to flirt with Southwest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And he ends up taking this over. It was an elven fortress. He ends up taking it over, bouncing everyone out of there, and he turns it into what he calls the Isle of Werewolves, and he starts fucking making werewolves. So he's capturing men, subjecting them to magic or some shit, or having other werewolves fight him, and he's basically creating an army of werewolves.
If you're creating an army of werewolves, seem like the right way to go.
All right. I'm going to take a pee break, and then we're going to get back to this. We're going to talk about the People's Magazine best couple in Beleriand at this time. Coming up next, you're going to see what I mean. All right, while we take a break from class and take care of some business, you can also take care of some business.
If you don't follow us on Instagram or Twitter already, our Instagram handle is Historically High Pod. That's Historically High POD. And our Twitter is Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right, and back to our show. All right, back at it. When I say power couples, who do you think of? You thinking McElhenney and Olsen?
Bennifer, McElhaney, and Olsen.
Reynolds,
Bennifer's back, right?
Reynolds and
They are.
Blake Lively.
Yeah.
Who else is back? Yeah, Bennifer.
Ben Affleck and Jennifer are back.
All right.
A-Rod's out of the picture.
These two blow them out of the water. Anyone you can think of. We're talking about Baron and Luthien. And these two little scallywags end up changing literally the course of everything. So Baron is actually the son of a guy we talked about, Barrett here. He's the guy that got the ring from good old Finrod. Or Finn, one of the Fingon. And he ends up kind of like, after the whole Morgoth taking over the whole north, he takes like him and his dad take like a remaining faction of their forces small, and they become outlaws, and they just harass the shit out of Morgoth's troops and everything like that. Just trying to set up outposts and all that kind of stuff.
So even though Morgoth is the king dick now in that area, they're just trying to piss him off?
It's kind of like a guerrilla style. I mean, that's their home, man. Part of it's their home.
Okay, yeah, I guess
so. It's kind of like
it's kind of
like a guerrilla. Back. I mean, they'd have sanctuary if they went. They fought they could leave, but they're not going to leave their home. They know they have to they're the shield that's holding this stuff back. So these are all very courageous people, Adam. So
it sounds so close to so many things in other histories that we've learned about.
I know. So him and his dad and their band of merry men are harassing the shit out of Morgoth's troops, and it ends up, they get whittled down through attrition, and then it ends up just being Baron. So he's now getting hunted because he's like a wanted man. You know, it's a Sheriff of Nottingham situation. Baron's Robin Hood, and the sheriff is Morgoth. He's like, I know this motherfucker's out there. Find him. There's a prize on his head. So he ends up getting chased into that forest that I was talking about where the spider was. He doesn't run into the spider, but he ends up either running into some trouble, and he gets rescued, or he ends up meeting with Luthien. And Luthien is the daughter of this guy named Thingol. When we were talking about the elves moving west, some of them saw something and was like, hey, what's that? I want to go look at it. That was Thingol and a couple of his followers. He went over. They ended up going into this area of like a forest and meeting this Maiar that was hanging out in Middle-earth, and her name was Melian.
She was just chilling by herself?
Yeah, she might have been like a forest Maiar and been like trying to keep the forest alive and everything like that. And
like a hippie.
Kind of, and I think she kind of entrances him, and he ends up like falling asleep or some shit for literally like 6 months to a year, long enough that all the other elves make their way to that floating island and get the fuck out. So that happened that long ago. So by this time, he's got an established kingdom and everything. Well, this is his daughter. So she's the daughter of an elven king and basically a demigod. And she is widely known as, in the history of this world, as the most beautiful woman ever. She ends up meeting Baron, and she's like, look at this rugged son of a bitch. She's not even my species. God damn, I got to get me some of that. So they meet and fall in love. And basically, the deal is, he goes to her father, and he's like, I want to marry your daughter. And he's like, okay. And he's like, okay, I'll let you marry her. What you got to get me, though, is, remember in John Wick, where they always talk about the impossible task that John Wick accomplished to get free of like his debt to the or to whoever the assassins or high table. And
his folklore, kind of.
Yes. So he gives them an impossible task. He's like, I'll let you guys get married if you bring me one of the Cimmerils from Morgoth's crown. So they're like, cool. We'll be back in a little while. So they end up taking off, and
they actually went to try to do this?
Oh, yeah. They love each other, man.
That's like an impossible task, though.
They're star-crossed lovers.
Doing that.
They're star-crossed lovers, and they don't have to run away and try to live in secret. If this happens, he's got to let him marry and then treat him as one of the family. And then their children can also stay within the line and take over as king. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to trying to have this thing be legitimate.
Too much.
Okay, let's just
this
see what.
Let's
see what happens.
It's just too much.
Let's find out what happens to these crazy kids. They're in love, fucking hormones raging. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. You think he's not gonna fucking do whatever?
Yeah, I guess
that's magical demigod elf. That's A5 Wagyu.
All right. Well, yeah, and it's probably,
and she's never gonna age. Even if you do, for the day until the day you die, she's gonna look just as hot.
If it's better to die than live without her, okay.
So they don't leave right away. He goes off to try to kind of strategize and try to figure out if they're going to be able to accomplish this. He goes over because he knows Fingon, sorry. He goes over, talks to him. So this is also where, remember I was telling you about the Sons of Fëanor and their oath?
Uh-huh.
They find out about this. And they find out someone else is going after a Cimmeril. So two of the sons, they meet up with Beren, and they basically give him bad information. They're like, you're going to find the information you're looking for at Minas Tirith. And I'm not sure if Beren knew that it had been taken over and it's now the fucking island of werewolves or anything. But they try to send him to try to snuff out the competition. They're not just maybe going to kill him, dishonor in that perhaps. But they send him because they know he's going to die.
Yeah.
So somehow I don't know if another elf, Finrod, goes with him. I believe they're friends. And they're actually captured by Sauron. And basically how he's going to kill him is he has him down in a pit and he just keeps releasing werewolves in to kill him.
Sauron just sounds like the worst guy.
Well, I mean, Morgoth's pretty bad.
He's pretty bad, but
We're gonna get something here in a second. So Finrod ends up killing a werewolf with his bare hands, maybe even a couple of them, but then he ends up dying of his wounds. At this point, though, Luthien shows up to rescue Beren, and Luthien has made a friend along the way, and his name is Huan. I think it's Huan, but I like saying it as Juan because it's Huan, so Juan.
okay.
Okay, remember when I was talking?
Okay, so it's not J-U-A?
No,
Okay.
but Juan, right?
Yeah, okay,
Okay,
all right.
Remember when I was telling you about that dude Orome, the Valar that like to hunt people?
Yeah.
His dog? Okay, this is like a wolfhound of Valinor. Basically, this is like a demigod dog. The dog can talk 3 times, is allowed to talk 3 times in its life. And it uses like 2 of the times to talk to Luthien. It originally is with the Sons of Fëanor. And it's like, you guys are fucking not cool dudes. So it ends up bailing on them to go run with Luthien. And she shows up to the Isle of Werewolves with this fucking wolfhound. The legend behind this wolfhound also is that the only thing that will kill this wolfhound is when it meets the greatest wolf in Middle-earth. So Sauron starts sending all the werewolves, and this dog is fucking these things up. Just killing them left and right until he's out of werewolves. And then finally he's like, all right. So he transforms himself into a werewolf, the greatest werewolf he believes in Middle-earth, goes out to fight him, and it's a good fight, but fucking Juan gets him by the throat and fucking pins him to the ground. Sauron tries to turn into a snake to get away. Juan's not having it. He's like, I'll fucking kill you as a snake too. So finally he changes back into his form, and the dog's got him by the throat, and Luthien's like, where is Beren? And through some type of like, I don't know if he ends up like getting away real quick or something like that, or there's like orcs that come in to distract him. I think it might be something like that, but he ends up getting away and she ends up rescuing Beren.
So after all the werewolves and everything were gonzo, Beren had escaped.
No. Beren was in the tower. Sauron had escaped somehow.
Oh, okay.
After the negotiation, I don't know if he had some guys that came in and attacked and it drew their attention or whatever, but he ends up getting away. So he heads back to like Angband or something. She then goes into the tower and frees Beren. So they make their way for Ingmar. They're like, we're heading to get the fucking Cimmeril so we can get hitched. So the dog actually, Juan, he's not a dog, he's fucking amazing. He ends up going ahead of them and helping them acquire disguises. He ends up killing another like werewolf and gets its skin and gives it to Beren so he can sneak into Ingmar. And he ends up killing like this war bat or something, like this giant mutant bat, and ends up skinning it and giving the skin to Luthien. So they
what
can
is
get
Beren again?
Huh?
What is Beren again?
He got the werewolf skin.
But is he a human?
Beren is just a man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's got 100 years. He's not a long life.
That's why he's trying to get this shit done, dude.
Okay.
He wants to get it in while he can get it in. So they end up infiltrating and getting into like the throne room, and they're discovered. And because she's part Maiar, Luthien has this gift of like song. And so she basically sings this song, and it kind of actually puts Morgoth out. And she's like, fucking grab it.
Oh, yeah.
So he runs up onto Morgoth, and Beren takes out his knife, and he pries one of the Cimmerils out of his crown and grabs it. And he's like, he's still out. I'm going for 2. And so he fucking jams the knife in, and the knife breaks while it's in the second one, and the shard hits Morgoth in the face, and he starts to wake up.
Oh no.
So they're trying to rush to get out of there before he gets up, and they're met actually with like Morgoth's personal fucking guard dog. Like it's some crazy, it's the werewolf.
A lot of dogs.
Yeah. Well, he's breeding crazy fucking things. And Baron goes to hold out the Cimmeral to like the blinding light from it to try to scare it off, and it fucking bites his hand off and bites the Cimmeral and swallows it. And then the fucking the things are supposed to be super hot to hold.
Cimmerals?
No, hold on. I think there's something about like the light that's within it and evil. It somehow, I don't know if it hurts the werewolf.
Oh,
it bails
okay.
and takes off just running like across the whole fucking plane. And
With
then,
the hand and Cimmeral
yes.
inside of it.
So basically, they're now hunting this werewolf, and I don't know if they go and inform her father too or get message to Thingol because he sends out people too. And basically, they corner this werewolf, and Baron and Juan end up fighting this thing, killing it, but it ends up killing both of them. So it was the greatest wolf because it killed Juan, but then Baron is sitting there and he's dying. So Luthien basically is like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and pick to die too. So she lays down and is somehow able to go ahead and just kind of lose the will to live and dies with him. Because she is part Maiar and elf, she heads to the halls of Mandos. She gets there and she goes before Mandos, who's the gatekeeper.
Her soul?
Her soul.
Okay.
And I think more so, like, it's, you know, it seems like you would be, like, in a corporeal body, not just, like, a floating, like, ball of light or something like that. Because
Zombie-like.
she goes to Mandos, and she basically is like, you know, please let us live. I'll sing you a song. And she sings such a banger that it moves Mandos to pity. And he goes before Manwë, and he's like, I just came out of the studio, and I just heard the greatest thing I've ever heard. We got to sign this chick. And so the deal is that he gives her the option. You can either be resurrected and live out the remainder of your life as one of the Eldar in Valinor, where it's safe and you can live forever and live your wildest dreams, or I'll send you both back. I'll bring him back, and you're both mortals. And she's like, fucking send me back.
So she gave up her godhood.
So she gave
too.
up, yeah, that ability. So she went back and she became mortal. He ends up getting resurrected, and they have a son named Dior, who's going to also be a player later down the road. So we're now at like 468 in the Year of the Sun. I'm trying to remember when the last time we actually discussed a date. 455. So we're not that far past that. We're like 13 years.
In a mortal's life.
So this is when the fifth battle, and it's called the War of the Jewels, takes place. The War of the Jewels is basically the first engagement since Fëanor came over and started the fight. So it's gone on for, is it hundreds of years at this point? This battle, the War of the Jewels, or this war has. So Maedhros is like, okay, sounds about right for time. We've had a few years off. It's time to start building up some forces to try to kick fucking Morgoth out of here and get rid of him. So he starts building basically like an alliance. It's called the Union of Maedhros. And he gets basically elves and the Edine men together, gets dwarves together, finds some other men that are further east called the Easterlings. He's like, hey, you guys want to get in on this? And they're like, yeah, we'll go help fight for you.
They've all had enough of Morgoth shit. It's time to...
Well, the alliance could have been actually stronger, but because of that whole oaths of the Sons of Fëanor, they'd been like going around and actually like killing certain people who, because the Cimmeral is now in the possession of Thingol. He has it.
Oh,
because they killed the wolf and got the
dad
out of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was the deal. They could get married if he got the Cimmeral. So he has that. So these two guys are going around like trying to get this Cimmeral. So they're actually doing some killing, and they're pissing off like other elf, cities and tribes and stuff like that. So because of that, and because of their relationship to Thingol or something like that, it somehow causes other people to kind of back out of the alliance. So they're not as strong as they can be. The Sons end up making an alliance with Thingol, with them telling him basically, hey, give us the Cimmeral. And he's like, nah. And they're like, well, then after we get done fighting Morgoth, we're going to fight you. And he's like, cool, let's just do that then.
You're not going to come to see me after that. You're probably not going to make that.
So basically the plan is, and like we have the border of Montana to the east, border of Idaho and Oregon mountain range
West.
there to the west. Maedros's forces are built up of the guys from the east, dwarves, and then like the sons of Fëanor and like those guys, and I think Thingol's forces might have been there too. On the west hand side, we have like let me see, we have Fingon's army, and then like a bunch of the men, the Edine or whatever they're calling them, and then he's kind of worried because they don't think they have enough guys. And then this guy named Turgon, we mentioned him. He was the guy that went and started Gondolin in the Hidden Valley.
Oh,
They
in
had-
the mountain range?
They hadn't heard from him for like hundreds of years. He ends up showing up with like 10,000 elven warriors
From
soldiers from that city, and he's like, "Oh, thank God." They also have this other group of elves who are under the command of this guy named Gwyndor. Well, Gwyndor has a brother named Gelmir. Well, Gelmir got captured
By
Wow.
Morgoth?
a while back. So Morgoth, because he has spies all over, I cannot pronounce this fucking country. Beleriand. Jesus, why is that so hard for me to remember that? The spelling doesn't sound phonetic. Beleriand. He has spies all over, so he kind of gets wind of what's going on, but he realizes that, well, I gotta just like strategically try to beat these guys. So he sends his main force against Maedhros in the east, and then sends kind of like a small token force against the western side. Well, with that force, he sends the Gelmir. And basically, this small force is supposed to come out, bait them coming in, and then a larger force behind him is supposed to come smash into him. So how they try to do this is basically they bring Gelmir out and start dismembering him across like a valley where they can still see them, and his brother's just sitting there watching them cut pieces off of him before they finally kill him. Well, he's so fucking pissed off that he just calls his men. He's like, fucking charge, and just fucking takes off to go after him.
Right. Falls right into the trap.
Yeah. Well, Fingon is kind of just chilling back like, this isn't part of the plan. I know what's going to happen here. You guys are going to get wiped out, but we're not going to get wiped out with you. We'll have to try to come in and just clean up a little bit and try to help you. So he pulls his men back, keeps his men back, and also Turgon keeps his men back. He's like, I'm definitely not fucking going in there. That's stupid. Well, what they underestimate is Gwyndor basically fucks himself a path to Angband. He's so pissed off about his brother, he kind of underestimates, or Morgoth underestimates, him getting through.
The power of rage.
Yes. And he gets all the way through and basically starts breaking down the gates of Angband with his forces. And Morgoth gets a little bit nervous, actually, because no one's ever actually made it this far. But basically, the gates are in the, like, there's towers and, like, it funnels you in. He basically just surrounds him with all of his men that are still in the fucking fortress, and he kills all of them down to the last man. So they're all got wiped out. So then, at this point, Fingon and his troops are trying to catch up a little bit, and this kind of gives you a sense of the scope of like the fortress and everything, is that he's able to use all these hidden tunnels to basically release his main fortress on kind of the flanks, and basically surrounds them and starts pushing everybody back. Maedhros over in the east, that's where he sends Glamrung, the dragon.
The Komodo dragon?
The land dragon.
Fly.
Yeah, the land dragon. So he's fucking up that side and everything. During the battle, part of those Easterling guys, they end up turning on the elves. They were working for Morgoth. Like half of them under Wonder Commander, the other half of them were actually good and kept trying to help him. But basically, you're fighting a war on three fronts at that point. So they end up getting just completely like decimated. Finally, Turgon comes to Fingon's aid, sees them just getting hammered, and basically allows him, instead of they're trying to run away and they're just getting killed from behind. They can't organize retreat.
Trying to lay cover fire for him.
Exactly. So that's what Turgon comes in. He's like, hey, we're going to cover you. We'll allow you to strategically retreat. They start moving back. The only reason that Maedhros is able to even escape on the Eastern Front is basically because the dwarves are like, fucking get out of here. Like, we can actually fight against this dragon. They had full armor. They had masks. They were more resilient to heat for the dragon fire and everything. And they were able to actually, like, wound the dragons with their axes. So they basically formed a fucking circle around this dragon to buy them time for these elves to get out of there. And during kind of the chaos and everything of buying them time, the dragon just basically finds like the king of the dwarves and charges him and just tramples him and kills him. And before it's able to go ahead and finish him off, he basically takes his sword and just jams it and gut shots him. And so the dragon has to end up retreating, and a whole bunch of like Morgoth's forces like follow the dragon because they're losing like their big piece off the board. So the dwarves, after that happens, they just kind of quit fighting. They go and pick up the king's body, and they just basically walk back to their fortress, and no one fucks with them the entire time. I think someone tries to harass them at the beginning, and they just destroy them. They're just on such a mission to get back that no one even touches them.
It's like, okay, we'll just sort of let you go because you're just fucking everything up.
Yes. We just saw you stand up to a dragon. I don't think any of us are really going to be a match. Any of the orcs are going to be a match for
We'll
him.
sit this one out.
Yeah. All 7.
So
Thankfully,
they
all
extinct the only dragon that was around at that time?
Glaurung?
Yeah.
Yes. He was the only one that Morgoth had created.
So he made one and he got... Damn.
He's
crazy.
not dead, though. He escapes.
Oh.
It just forces him off the battlefield, his wound does.
Oh,
he's no
okay.
longer able to fight. So he's still a piece on the board. And then luckily all 7 sons of Fëanor escape, so they can still go cause shit and everything like that because they're not dealing with enough stuff with Morgoth. They got to deal with people, shit from their own people. So the Balrogs, they're out fighting too. Mm-hmm. And the leader of them, one of the Maiar that, Morgoth made, it was like his chief Maiar aside from Sauron, and it turned into a Balrog. His name is Gothmog.
So he's like the head Balrog.
He's the head Balrog. So he ends up arriving on the western front, and he has a fucking like elite troll guard. And he
We got
battles
trolls now too?
Yeah. He was able to find them in the mountains, and they're not like, smart creatures or anything, so they're easily susceptible. And so I'm sure Morgoth was just like, what do you guys want? They're like, mud and food. And he's like, I can get you mud
Deal.
and food. Yeah.
We'll make that
and
happen.
I'll let you just kill people if you want. And they're like, we like that. So basically Gothmog comes, and Fingon just completely runs through his entire troll guard and then is like, you. And him and Gothmog are fighting, and he's fighting him to a standstill. And then another Balrog comes up and grabs Fingon from behind and restrains him. And Gothmog splits him right in the head with his axe and kills him. So there's also, Turgon's forces are still they're coming back after they see this happen. Now they're in full retreat too, trying to get back. And so out of the Edine, the men, there were like 2 guys, a king and then his son, named Hor. It's Huor, 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 and Hurin. Hurin is the son. And they basically just tell Turgon, they're like, hey, we'll buy you some time, get out of here. And they form basically a human wall across this pass. Because if they allow, they know Gondolin is hidden. It's this refuge, kind of a last bastion there if something happens. They know that if they allow them to get through and follow Turgon, he's going to lead them right to Gondolin.
Right
They're going to find out where it is. So basically, they end up getting killed. All of the men end up getting killed, except for Hurin. And he ends up getting captured, but it takes them, he grabs a double-sided axe from like a fallen troll or something, and he ends up killing 70 other enemies before he gets captured. The only reason that he's unable to fight is because apparently like troll blood is acidic. So for everyone he kills and guts and everything, it's wearing away at his axe.
Oh.
And finally the axe just wears down to like a metal nub on the end. And so they end up capturing him. Once Morgoth gets a hold of him, he takes him up to like one of the peaks of the volcanoes above the fortress and basically has a chair made and sits him down and chains him in the chair and is basically able to kind of either bewitch or put something over him that allows him to look across all of Beleriand and see the shit that's happening with his family, all the bad things that are happening. And he puts like a curse on him. And he's like, even if you get away from here, I'm putting a curse upon you and your line for that anything that you touch goes badly. And that ends up playing into a whole bunch of other shit because he ends up getting away.
So he cursed his entire human race.
His line.
Oh, so just his lineage.
Yeah, he's only
okay.
able to do that.
Okay.
All right, we're going to start jumping a little bit further in time because there's pretty much a lull that kind of happens.
A stalemate.
Well, I mean,
sort of.
at this point, Morgoth pretty much has control over. I mean, he hasn't moved completely south yet, but there's no resistance now in the north that can hold him back. So he does need to go and kind of recuperate. He lost some people, but he can replenish his troops and everything like that faster than anybody else can. So there's a guy named Turin, and he's actually the son of Hurin, the guy that's chained up on the chair. He ends up being the one to kill Glamrung.
The one that was coming to save his brother?
No, the dragon.
Oh, yeah.
So pretty much
so
because
he was the one that finished him off?
he finishes him off. So Morgoth is pretty much like, there's not really anyone to challenge me, and he kind of tells Glamrung, he's like, go do your thing. You can wander. So he ends up, and dragons love gold. They want treasure hoards and everything. So he ends up finding this place that's a little further south. It's that place along the river that was built into the mountain. I think I mentioned it earlier. I know I'm saying a lot of shit. He ends up finding that place, breaking into it, and wanting to use that as his like treasure hoard because there's like a treasure there. Well, Tyrion ends up somehow like tricking him, or he gets tricked by Huron gets tricked by him, or sorry, Tyrion gets tricked by him, and he ends up coming to and hunting this dragon down, and he gets himself positioned in the bottom of like a little tiny, like a little ravine, just like a canal, not a ravine, a canal. And as the dragon goes over him, he doesn't see him, and he basically just takes his sword and just shoves it right up through its chest, all the way to the hilt. And as the dragon's dying, it ends up doing something that ends up killing him too. So he dies, but the dragon also dies. So that's where that piece comes off the board.
Okay.
So Dior, that I mentioned, was Baron and Luthien's kid. He ends up
Power couple.
Power couple.
They had a kid?
Yeah.
Oh, they must have got busy quick.
Yeah.
I guess that wasn't a big swath of time, though, that went by.
Well, this is now, between this. This is like, this could be, 50 years or so. So Dior actually has a daughter, too, named Elwing. So this has obviously got to be 50 or 60 years. Thingol is actually the king that has the Cimmeril. Mm-hmm. He wants to make a crown so he can wear it. So he has the dwarves, gives them the Cimmeril, and is like, here, fashion this into this crown. And during their time with it, the dwarves basically just become obsessed with it.
That's a hard-o move to want that in your crown, just one of them.
And so Thingol actually gets killed by the dwarves for the Cimmeril. And then Baron,
good move,
being the excellent son-in-law, avenges him and hunts down a bunch of the dwarves and kills them. So that's actually going to kind of play into why further down the line there's some animosity. Like, it's basically racial tensions between the dwarves and the elves. It's kind of stemming from almost like this type of thing. Like, you killed like one of our kings for fucking shiny rock.
That's the greatest racial tension that I've ever heard between the elves and the dwarves.
Mm-hmm. So basically, once Baron, gets rid of the dwarves and everything, they take the Cimmeril back, and Luthien has it, and so she becomes a target for the Sons of Feanor, who are basically chasing her. So it's not just fucking Morgoth, now it's these assholes. And this other guy named Erendil ends up being born, and Baron and Luthien, sometime after this, end up both sharing their final death.
Together. It would have to be together.
And as she passes it to Dior, who's their son. One of the Sons of Feanor ends up hunting down Dior and ends up killing him. And his wife and his two sons. The only one left alive is his daughter, Elwing. So she ends up getting the Cimmeril somehow. And she basically heads as far south as she can get. She basically heads for like Baja, like almost San Diego. Mm-hmm. And there's like a river that empties out. It's on the coast, but it would be more like if Mexico wasn't there. Sorry. If Mexico wasn't there and like Arizona had like a river running through it that emptied into the sea. So she ends up holding out there. River?
Huh? The Colorado? Doesn't that go through Arizona?
But then it goes into Mexico probably, right? Or does that come out in the Baja Gulf?
It might. I think it empties into the sea.
Okay, same thing then. So that's called the mouths of Sirion, is where the mouth of the river comes out. So she's kind of trying to like hide out there. Well, what ends up happening during this time is that Gondolin ends up getting found out by Morgoth. He ends up capturing one of like the nephews of the king there, of I think Turgon's nephew, and through torture ends up finding where it's at. And so Turgon, never expected to be found out and everything. So basically, in this time after Glamrung had died, Morgoth had actually created a couple different more dragons, all still just like land lizards, and launches them, the Balrogs, and a ton of orcs against this city. And they're trying to, gather their defenses and everything like that. And the city ends up getting destroyed, but Gothmog, the head of the Balrogs, is killed. Turgon is killed. I can't remember if they kill each other. This guy named Glorfindel, he's going to come into play later, but basically he's kind of like, he almost seems like he's kind of an Achilles type soldier.
Runs hot,
but he's also like an excellent warrior. I think he ends up killing another one of the Balrogs himself while like covering the escape of like these people out this hidden pass. So he's like full on hero. So that's another piece off the board. So that city's gone now too. So pretty much unchecked power everywhere from, halfway up to the north. And there's still little pockets probably of elves and everything, but at any point he could, Morgoth could invade and just completely own the thing. So Erendil actually meets Elwing and they get married. Now, the reason I'm mentioning these two, and I've been mentioning these two, is they actually have 2 kids. And one of the kids is Elrond, and the other kid is named Elros. So they're all hiding out at the mouths of Sirion, and the Sons of Fëanor attack. Well, Elwing jumps into the ocean with the Cimmeril, and the ocean god basically like, I'm just going to give you a little shove and get you to Erendil's ship, and gets him on and gets her onto the ship. And both of them are like, we need to head to Valinor to see if we can get some help for what's going on in this situation. Well, they end up leaving their kids behind. And so one of the Sons of Fëanor, his name is Maglor, and he's kind of like, he strikes me as more of like, he's like a poet, like an artist and everything. He kind of seems like the guy in the back being like, oh, do we have to fucking kill these people again? Like, are we still killing people for these fucking rocks? So he actually ends up finding these 2 kids and actually raises them. Doesn't let anything to happen. He's like conflicted the whole time because he's like, technically I should have to kill these kids, but I'm just going to keep raising them for a little bit until I really have to do it.
It's like the people that own tigers or bears.
Like, or pythons. And they just want their... Yeah. So Erendil ends up using the Cimmeril as like kind of like a North Star, and he finds his way with him and his wife. They find their way to Valinor. And basically go in front of like Manwë, and they're like, for the love of God, do you know what's going on over there? We're sorry. Like, we're sorry for like the Noldor fuck up with Fëanor and him telling you to fuck yourself and then killing all those elves and taking their ships. We're really sorry. We've been up to our eyeballs in a shit sandwich for like the last like 1,000 years with your brother.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not proud of.
Yeah, this is happened. Like, your family squabbles are fucking coming down on us. Now, please try to fix this shit. Well, Manwë's finally like, all right, like, yeah, I haven't been doing a lot or anything like that. They end up convincing him, and he mobilizes basically Valinor for war. So that's every single like elf that stayed there, and for like 1,000 years has been just like populating and doing all that kind of stuff. So the Elteri, or the ones that are like the ocean going ones, they're like, aren't you, so we're sailing over to try to help out the people whose ancestors killed a bunch of our people. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, fine, I'm going to send like as few people just to sail the boats, and not one of our people is setting foot on Middle Earth. You get off our
crew.
Yeah, you get off our fucking boats as soon as you get there. And so they mobilize all of Valinor. Morgoth has basically been building up this force as well this entire time too. And they said that his force, I'm going to hit you with a number here that's going to seem staggering, but his force numbered between orcs and everything like almost like upwards of 1 million. Like beyond the eyes could see.
Valinor's has to be way bigger though.
Not so much bigger, but if you think about it, like every soldier that's an elf is worth probably like 5 to 10 orcs. Like you have some of these elves that are literally riding up to fucking fight Morgoth himself. Yeah. So I mean, some of these guys are fucking, I mean, they're dying, but they kind of, one of them got him 7 times. So all the Noldor that were still in Valinor, all the Vanyar, which were that other one, aside from the ocean going people, all of the Maiar that are still there, and then even possibly some of the actual Valar end up going over. They land where everyone seems to land, like in the Oregon, Washington area. And for 40 years, this war goes on. 40 years.
Between Morgoth and
Between the
Valinor.
Morgoth and his million-strong force and this army of elves and demigods and all this shit. And men. There were 3 houses of men that were still there in Middle-earth that helped to join him. They were small, and they got diminished and everything like that because they had been fighting this fight, but they still fought on that side. And so it got to the point where they had driven finally all of Morgoth's forces back to Angband. And he was like, you know, what's the last-ditch effort? Hail Mary. He ends up unleashing. He's been working on this. He unleashes winged dragons. And he's been breeding this one in secret and has kept it hidden. And the main dragon, his name is Encalagon the Black. So for size reference, I'm trying to think of how I would even compare this. Bigger than your subdivision?
Just big old dragon.
Just enormous. Beyond the scope of scale, I guess, that people can really fathom as far as like a living creature. So there's other also winged dragons, just smaller ones. So they end up starting just fucking up the Noldor and the Valar forces and everything. Start driving them back. When all of a sudden,
new weapon that nobody's seen before.
Oh yeah. Well, all of a sudden, Erendil arrives. Doesn't arrive in his normal ship though. The Valar are like wild card time bitches, and they fucking bless his ship to be able to fly. And he's wearing the Cimmeril on his head.
Oh, okay.
So he flies in, and for an entire day, him and his flying ship battle these dragons, and he ends up killing all of them. Finally kills Encalagon, kills him right above the volcanoes, and as his body comes down, it lands on all the volcanoes and just crushes them.
That's a big victory.
Oh, yeah. So Morgoth ends up getting captured. I think Tolkien comes in, kicks down the door. They find him hiding in his lowest chamber, chain his ass. Cimmerils are taken off of his crown, and the crown is beaten into a collar around his neck. They cut off his feet.
It's a good move. You can't get away with that any feet.
Mm-hmm. And they take him back to Valinor, and they finally, and he doesn't go into the halls of Mandos. They shove him through what they call the doors of night into the timeless void.
That sounds pretty bad.
And they're fucking done with him.
That's a life sentence.
Oh yeah, there's no coming back for that. There's some stuff that says they may have beheaded him right before they sent him through, just to be sure. You know, when you do the pop in the head with zombie movie, there might have been something to that. So the aftermath of this battle for 40 years is basically the ending of what they call the First Age. Second Age starts now, but what's been done is...
How many ages are there?
Up to 3. There's a 4th one that is started, essentially, but it's still in the early stages of that one. And once we get into the Second Age, Third Age is going to fly by, but Second Age has got some key points that really play into it. Am I starting to lose you?
I don't know. That's a lot of ages, but it's good stuff.
We're pressing on. All right. So most of Beleriand is actually destroyed during this whole thing. It's like a cataclysmic event, and it sinks into the ocean. So the ocean gets bigger. We basically lose California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, probably Colorado. No. Yeah, probably Colorado. No,
just
Utah.
The war wrecked everything into the ocean.
Yeah, basically there was so much. I mean, you have gods fighting and everything like that, and just the destruction.
A lot of Earth being moved.
Yeah,
they created it. They're destroying it just the same.
Yep. So basically, like the Valar, all the elves that are still there, they're basically like, just fucking come home. Let's get out of here.
We've done enough.
Yeah, and a lot of them do end up leaving, but there's a certain individuals that are like, no, I mean, we're good. We're gonna head east. We're gonna see what's going on over there.
We got some stuff we want to look at.
So a couple names that stay. A guy named Círdan. He was like a guy that just hung out a lot during the battle on basically the south coast. He was like a shipwright. Mm-hmm. Galadriel, who she has a huge part in the story. This guy named Celeborn, who ends up, I believe, they end up getting married. This guy named Celebrimbor, who's actually a descendant of Fëanor. And then this guy named Gil-galad, who ends up becoming right at the beginning of the Second Age, find out he's in line. He was the one who's now the High King of the Noldor. So the High King of the elves remaining on in Middle Earth. And then Elrond decides to stay. So kind of a weird thing that happens with Elrond and his brother is because their lineage, weirdly enough, can be tied back essentially to pretty much every early or iteration of men and elves through some type of breeding. The Valar kind of give them a choice, and it's like, hey, we're going to give you a choice, because some elves with the whole like no death, it kind of wears on some of them. The life is just goes on and everything. So like you're kind of in a rare circumstance where you have a foot in both worlds. So we're going to give you a choice. You can either live as a man, or we'll grant you mortality. I think the whole granting them mortality, I don't think it was like going to be the lifespan of man, but it would be a finite amount of time. And so Elrond was like, I think I'll stay an elf. He's like, I kind of want to see where this goes. And Elros is like, I think I'm going to be a man. So because of Beleriand basically being fucking gone, all these men that were there, the ones that survived this war, don't really have a place to go, but they also laid their lives on the line, their limited lives on the line, to try to help them win this war. So the Valar are like, we got a special prize for you. So to the southwest, quite a ways out into the sea of Middle Earth, they're basically like, we got you a shiny new island.
Ooh.
So the island is about, I did size comparison, and the island is about 3/4 of the size of like Utah.
So still big.
Yeah, I mean 3/4 the size. An island, and it's just for them. And it's a 5-pointed star shape. And they end up calling it Numenor. So Elros, being a man, he's like, I'm going to take the remaining men that survived this, and we're going to sail for this island. And they get there, and this is only for them. So the Valar bless them, essentially, or give them the gift, some type of gift, to where, because they get their, special island, but they're like, we're going to go ahead and sweeten the pot just a little bit, because you did help us out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and give you longer lifespans. So you guys can live maybe like 300 years. We'll give you 300 as an average lifespan. Dwarfs are about 250, regular humans 100, and then I think hobbits are like 120. So hobbits even have a little bit.
Not bad.
No. So they end up sailing for Numenor for the reward, and he becomes the first king of Numenor. The dwarves that survived, because where they were living, that got sunk into, they had to end up going east as well. There had been some dwarves when they first woke up that actually went east anyway earlier on.
Explored the other.
Yep, and they were
area.
descended of this guy named Durin. And so Durin has a legend that he was the first one that was awake out of the dwarves. He was the first one to be granted life. So he kind of has their messiah, their dwarf messiah status. So he actually founded this place in the Misty Mountains, that big, huge stretch of mountains that's now pretty much kind of in the middle of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Now that the changes happened, he ends up establishing this huge kingdom under it. This has an entrance on one side of the range of mountains. You go walk right through. It takes you 3 days to pass through, and then it has a door on the other side.
It's a pretty big swath of land.
Yes. I mean, they never came over. They've been at this for thousands of years, digging this, this empire. So,
and they were left out of the fighting too.
Yeah. So they, the ones that ended up coming in had a safe place to go to right away. And I mean, I'm sure like there were other creatures on that side. Like I'm sure that Morgoth didn't have every single one of his like orcs and everything over there, or he had some type of allies.
You think there were orc defectors?
Oh, how would you trust that? Just the look, like, hello.
You have to know,
We want to be on your side.
You have to know that if it's one...
Your women are so much more attractive than ours. We used to be you.
You could snuff out one, so you might as well trust one. Or two, or three, because you know that if there's an uprising, you're going to be able to get rid of them.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is they're not mindless. They're just like, first of all, they look like crap, so they probably don't feel very good about themselves.
Yeah.
They're created also to be evil, and I'm sure so they're kind of inherently that way, but like they talk and have conversations and stuff, but at some point it's like,
We don't want to die.
We're going to go hang out with somebody else just to stay alive.
Your food is so much better.
So here's the thing too. yeah, Morgoth gets taken in. Some of the Balrogs that he had escaped, and then his chief lieutenant, Sauron, nowhere to be found. They find him for a quick second right after the battle. And as they're cleaning up, they're more worried about Morgoth and all that kind of stuff. And it almost kind of reminds me of like you'd be watching it for like a scene, and Sauron's just standing there in the middle of like the throne room as they're like carrying Morgoth out, and dragging him out. And one of the Valar or whatever turns and looks back at him and is like, "What are you going to do?" He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You should probably get back and maybe ask for some forgiveness to Manwë and see what he wants to do with you." And I think Sauron was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I think I left something on. I'll be right back. And he basically bolts it.
Headed that direction now.
I think he goes way, way far east and finds this place. My timing might be off on this, but he ends up finding this place, what becomes Mordor. Mordor would basically, the area of Mordor, has a mountain range, a huge mountain range, north, west, and south. So it's like a box. It's the size of Georgia. So, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
But it's super defensible. So I think he ends up kind of starting to establish a power base there. And that's actually in the Second Age. 500 years go by in the Second Age. During that time, there's some, the first king of Numenor dies. His line goes on, and they're developing as a civilization. Some of like their architecture, it looks like jacked up, like on steroids Roman architecture, like white
Fancy
marble everywhere.
Shit.
It's yeah. They're very advanced. So Sauron actually starts building up some power, and like 500 years after he kind of establishes himself in Mordor, he builds this giant fortress. It's called Barad-dûr. And then the elves that were hanging out kind of on the west coast, they start to kind of branch out. So that Celebrimbor guy, the relative of Fëanor, he kind of goes east a little bit and finds a place that's not too far east, still on the west side of the mountains. And he establishes a place called Eregion there, and basically establishes a kind of like a guild for like the craftsmen that are still like within the elves. And so they're working on like, jewels and all that kind of stuff, and trying to forge like new shit.
People with like interests kind of.
I think the area, the original, I'm trying to remember what the name of the city is that they're all in. I can't remember. I kind of see it as almost like a place where like artists would gather. It's kind of like that kind of place, like for three things, like Alexandria. I kind of imagine it like that. And so Sauron, he disguises himself. He realizes that he doesn't have the strength to take them on in like a military fight. So he tries to, and he's a Maiar, so he's not as strong as Morgoth. So even maybe one of these elves, if they really wanted to try to battle him, might be able to take him out.
If he can't escape.
Yeah, and he'll his spirit can't be killed, so his spirit can try to escape.
Yeah.
Which it probably would be able to, because I don't think you can catch a fucking spirit. But his form could be destroyed. So he disguises himself as an elf, and he calls himself Anatar. And it like translates to like the Lord of Gifts. And so he goes to Gil-galad, who's over on the west coast. He's created this kingdom called Lindon. So he first tries to go over there, and that's like where Galadriel and Elrond and Gil-galad are all hanging out. And he shows up, he's like, "Hey guys," he's like, "I'm an elf like you." He's like, "Hey, I know some stuff. You guys wanna build some stuff?" He's like, "I'm from Valinor. That's why you've never heard of me or anything like that. But we should."
Steve Buscemi going and hanging out with the kids.
Yes. And they're kind of like, the last 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years have kind of shown us not to be super trustworthy of strangers. So we're just going to go ahead and ask you to turn around and leave.
We're not going to kill you. We're just don't want to.
We don't know who you are, but you don't smell right. Like, be gone. So he ends up cruising down to Eregion and gets in with Celebrimbor and is able to kind of pique his interest. Because one of Sauron, when he was a Maiar, and he was under Valar, like service, before he went with Morgoth, he trained under Alul. So he was a really good smith.
So he had these talents that he could share.
Yeah. He's like, "You know what? That's a really good what you guys are doing there, but try this." And then it would help them progress. So he's like, "You know what you guys should actually do is you guys should actually try to make rings that are able to go ahead and reflect your power. And then that'll allow you guys to like maintain your kingdoms and everything. I can show you guys, like, let's work on that. And Celebrimbor's like, oh, that's an excellent idea. Or people can live on forever. The forest and everything will stay green. So he helps him craft 9 rings that they all seem to kind of look the same. He then crafts 7 other rings that are a little bit different. And Sauron's plan basically is, while he's helping them, he has a hand in making these rings. Mm-hmm. And what he's doing is he's essentially making them along the lines that he knows how they're made, and he knows what's going into them, and he knows what can, how he can tie them to something else to make them, the wares, be more malleable mentally to him. He's looking to go ahead and like not conquer the Middle Earth by force. He's going to basically subjugate everybody, and then he's just going to rule everyone through all these puppets.
Sort of a Infinity Stones.
Yes, but more of a mind control type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he's still puppeteering the Infinity Stones.
Mm-hmm. He's basically in control of all of these people, and that's how. And even if he doesn't control all the main people, he can still create forces and armies of other people to fight against him. Yeah. So anyway, it's going to be to his advantage. So after he creates all of those, like 100 years later, it takes him 90 years to make these rings. He ends up heading back to Mordor. Well, he doesn't tell him that's where he's heading, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to head out for a bit. I'll be back in a little while. Just keep everything going. You guys are doing great. So he bounces back to Mordor and pretty much works on for like 10 years forging the one master ring. Knowing everything that he did in all these other rings, he's able to use that and tie them all into this master ring. What he has to do, though, in order to kind of provide that power, like imagine he's a cell phone with 100%. Mm-hmm. He has to pretty much put 80%, if not more, of his power into this ring to give it the effectiveness to subjugate all the other rings. Well, also during this time, after he leaves, Celebrimbor makes 3 other rings. And he makes them like the best, because now he's had 90 years to kind of hone his craft and everything. So he makes 3 rings just for the elves.
That wouldn't be under the master ring.
Because he didn't have any influence. Yep. He didn't know what was up with them. So he creates 3 of them, and he gives one to, he keeps all 3. And then he finds out that, I'm trying to think of exactly how he finds out who Sauron is. He somehow finds out kind of what's been going on. He starts to become wise to it and everything. So he takes the 3 rings. He keeps all the other ones. He takes the 3 rings and he sends one to Galadriel. And she's actually, at this point, she's moved to the east of the mountains, and she's settled in this like big forest. Mm-hmm. It's called Lorien. He sends the other 2, one for Gil-galad on the west coast, and hanging out with Gil-galad is also that shipmaster. His name is Círdan. Sends him one of the rings. Well, right after he ends up sending the rings off, Sauron attacks Eregion. He has forces built up. He's had his boys building up forces back in Mordor this entire time. He's been working on these rings. Attacks the city, conquers it, sacks it, tells Celebrimbor, give me all the fucking rings. He's like, where's the other ones? I heard somehow he finds out there was other rings. Like, where's the other extras? Rings? So he's like, I'm not giving you those. He ends up getting the 9 and then the 7 that were meant for the dwarves. 9 were to go to men. Mm-hmm. And ends up killing Celebrimbor, letting a bunch of his archers shoot his body full of arrows, and then sticks him on a pike and uses him as a war banner as he marches.
Vlad the Impaler.
Kind of a little bit of Vlad the Impaler. Well, when Eregion was under attack, they got a messenger out to Gil-galad, and he sent Elrond with a force to try to help him out. By the time they got there, it was too far gone. Because, I mean, we're talking, you're traveling from, traveling across a state almost, or partway across a state to try to get somewhere. Nothing's happening fast. I mean, you're traveling by foot. Even if you're elves, your stuff doesn't move. A lot of the time, like skipping events and everything like that, it sounds like it's all happening really close together. But I mean, there's so much distance that's having to be covered.
And we've moved into more of a mortal realm where speed and magic and flying and these things were less common.
Yeah, the eagles really aren't a factor. They kind of just keep to themselves and everything. They'll come in every now and then, but it's not. There's no flight or anything. Everything's wagon trains and horses. I mean, you can
Nothing
get somewhere
quick.
faster on horses, but I mean, if you've got elven horses, I'm sure those are faster than regular horses. But you're still having to, it's going to take you a few days to get somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time they get there, it's already been taken, and then they turn kind of toward Elrond's forces and force them into the north and force them kind of into like a ravine and a canyon, but it's also like super defensible. So Elrond's like, okay, cool. So he ends up creating like a city there called Imladris. It's also called Rivendell. So that's where Elrond is now. And then at this
Too bad
point,
they didn't name it Scientology. It's too bad they didn't name it Scientology or something like that, since it was Elrond that founded it.
I wonder which Elrond. Is his name Elrond or Elron?
L. Ron Hubbard.
This is Elrond.
Oh, okay.
Thank
so it was
God.
a D.
So,
Maybe Elrond ripped that off. Maybe his parents were big Lord of the Rings fans.
that might be the case, and maybe that's what inspired him to create all this fucking crazy shit. I mean, this is pretty crazy shit.
Yeah.
But like his stuff makes this look like a fucking history lesson we're doing here. So when Sauron's forces first went against the elves, the elves and Gil-galad still had relations with Numenor. After they'd gotten settled and kind of established their empire, they started like sending ships back and forth and communicating. During this time, the Numenorians also were sending ships kind of to the like south of Middle Earth and establishing a couple colonies and everything far south of where all this other stuff is going on.
Spreading, though.
Yeah, so they have a presence and everything. And this is still during a time when there's going to come a time pretty soon after this where Numenor stops making contact and kind of takes a different direction that's kind of not Elf or Valar friendly. So, but at this time, they still have good relations.
Yeah.
So Gil-galad sends a ship down. He's like, hey, Sauron's back. We're at war. He had sent a messenger down like a few years before and said, hey, there's some stuff going on. Like there's more orcs showing up. Stuff, is getting a little dark. Just giving you guys a heads up in case we think Sauron, we never captured him.
Things are going a different direction.
Yeah,
than
he never got
expected.
accounted for, so we think this rascal might be doing something. So if we need you, we'll go ahead and send a homing pigeon. Well, they send it, and so Numenor ends up sending a huge force up to Lindon. And this is at the same time Sauron goes to attack Lindon and Rivendell. Well, the Numenorians show up, and these are basically, they're just a step below elves as far as like battle prowess. These are people that live for up to 300 years. Their their naval power is like unmatched, and on their island they just have a huge standing military.
So they're specialists in...
Yeah. They're not fighting farmers with pitchforks. These are
Yeah.
fully armored cavalry and everything. So basically they show up combined with the elves and they just mow fucking through them. They force Sauron all the way back to like Eregion, almost destroy his forces entirely. He's able to barely escape back to Mordor with like a handful of troops.
And all the rings that he took.
And all the rings that he took. So at this point, he realizes that he has the rings now, but his military is just complete shit.
Yeah.
So he's got to work to build that back up and everything. He starts giving rings out to like the men that were loyal to Morgoth and everything. He finds a couple of like leaders of those men, gives them a ring. They're able to kind of rein in their troops, become more powerful. And then he starts approaching, news doesn't travel fast here. There's not a way to get messages out to everybody. So like the only people that knew Sauron was back or anything like that, or that he could show up in this elvish disguise, are all probably dead. They were killed when he took over the place where he was helping make the rings. And it's not like they're sending out fucking wanted posters. Have you seen this elf?
Yeah, they have no idea.
So he's able to infiltrate not only like all of these places where like little small kingdoms or villages of men with their leaders and be like, hey, this ring, I'm with, what would it be like? I'm with Elven Ambassadors United. And we're just coming out here to go ahead and offer these rings that we're making to help you, be more successful and be more powerful. They're like, well, absolutely. And he's like,
Door-to-door ring
they're also
salesman.
going to make you live a little bit longer, too. They have that power in them. They're like, fantastic, I can rule longer. They're not fucking questioning this shit.
No.
He ends up going to and having relationships with different dwarf tribes and gives the dwarves the 7 rings that he made for them.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't account for the fact that when Alul made them, one of the things that he did was he made them extremely not susceptible to influence or anything. So the rings like don't do anything. If anything, the only thing the rings do is it hyper focuses them on like digging for treasure and trying to build shit. So they, in a way, it almost has them kind of like enclose themselves a little bit, put up some walls.
Well, and the dwarves had the 3 other rings too, didn't they?
No, that went to different elves.
Oh, okay.
Different leaders of the elves. So kind of around like in the second age, like now we're in like the 2000s. So 2029 is when Numenor has another king that steps in, and this king is like openly hostile toward like the elves and the Valar. I don't know if he has a problem with like, there seems to be a sentiment that kind of grows along the island that, yeah, we live a long time, but why aren't we living forever? We fought just like our ancestors fought, just like they fought and everything. We risked just as much as they did, and they get to live in this magical land. And, you know, we only get this island. It's a fucking paradise, but like we only get to enjoy it for 300 years. They get to enjoy their land forever. So there's kind of a sentiment that starts gaining ground. And then Numenor basically kind of gets divided into 2 different factions. They're called the Faithful and they're called the Kingsmen. So the Kingsmen are the ones that are against the elves. No one has like, for a little while, the Faithful who kind of maintain the old ways and everything, they still secretly will receive elven ships and communications with them and everything.
Yeah.
One of the rules that Numenor had put on it by the Valar is like, we're giving you this island. It's beautiful. You never have to leave it if you don't want to. You can if you want to. You can only sail east, though. Never sail further west toward our lands. If you lose sight of your island, you've gone too far. That's prohibited. You can receive ships that come because that's the elves coming out, but you're
we'll come your way. You don't come our way.
Yep, you're not allowed into what they call the Undying Lands, Valinor. It's still a pretty fucking good deal.
Yeah, but why?
It was the fate of men. That was just the fate of men. Your look right now is going to come into play to make some decisions. That exact look and what you're trying to, I think, get at.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big contributing factor as to what happens to Numenor. So more kings, more kings, more kings. Back in Middle Earth in like 2251, all those rings that he gave to the men, those kings are dead now. Well, not technically dead. What those rings did is, although they did make them stronger, live longer, what it also did is it pretty much ate away at them until they entered into what they call like the unseen world. It cursed them basically. So they are spirits, but they can grab. They're just invisible, essentially. They faded out of existence.
Into another realm.
So there's 9 of them, and they're called the Ring Wraiths or the Nazgul. And so they usually wear all black cloaks and everything. So the cloaks are just hanging over formed, but like completely transparent bodies and everything like that. So they become essentially like Sauron's most loyal and like terrifying servants. You can't kill them. I mean, you can try to like defeat them and you can make them retreat and everything like that, but you can't fully kill them. So he's got 9 lieutenants now. So they first make their appearance there. Let's jump forward another like 800 years. So those guys are up pucking around in Middle Earth, getting up to all kinds of shit. Sauron's still building up his forces. He knows the rings are working. He probably has figured it out that they're not working on the dwarves at this point. And I think he actually goes to hunt down the dwarven rings to try to get them back because he's going to use them on more men. And he can only get like a number of them back. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
It's a lot of ring talk. I like it. I like the thought of like him trying to go back and pick up the things that he...
Yeah, he's not like... He can't just appear. Like, that's what I think is kind of cool, is he's not just like a ghost that can like appear and everything. He actually has to then go travel and find where these rings are and be like, I don't know if he's like, I'll kill you if you don't get... Or if he's shown up with his troops, or if he's shown up as that elf and being like, remember when I gave you that ring? Spoke too soon. It wasn't for you. The dwarves were probably like, no, I've been having some pretty fucking good success of finding gold with this thing. You can't have this shit back.
It's not a brute force type takeover.
I'm sure he had to use that at some point because he did get a couple of them back, and I really don't see dwarves, based on how it describes them, of giving up jewelry or anything like that, unless they had something negative associated with it. In 3119, so we're like, 809 years later, this guy named Elendil is born on Numenor. He's born to a family who is part of the faithful, and his mother teaches him essentially how to speak the Elven language. It's called Kenway or Kenya or I can't remember, Quenya or something like that. Teaches him all about like the histories of them, the relationship. So he's like a captain in what they call the Sea Guard when he gets older. Basically, Numenor's our navy, but they kind of know that he's one of the faithful, so it's kind of kept him in kind of
A different position.
yeah, kind of like he's been passed over for maybe some promotions or something like that. In 3177, this guy comes along, and every leader of Numenor has taken on the title. The first title is Tar, T-A-R, and then they figure out a new name. It's kind of a pope situation. So they say Tar and then whatever the actual name is. And so this guy comes along, and his name is Tar Palantir. And he's the first, he's in the line of kings, but he's the first one in hundreds of years who is like, I think we've kind of been fucking up with this whole like Valar hating thing and everything. He repents and basically tries to restore the old ways, but the Kingsman faction is so established at that point, it almost causes like, not like a full-on civil war, but there's like some
civil unrest.
Yeah, it causes a lot of civil unrest and everything. It might maybe a couple riots or something like that. And at this time, if you're thinking about it, I'm not sure exactly how many people initially went to Numenor, but at this point, we're talking about hundreds of years later, if not, thousands of years later, actually.
Yeah, what had to have been
we're at 3,000 years later. So Numenor being the size, it's heavily populated. It's got several cities and everything like that. Even like the segments of the Star are their own like territories and factions and everything. But there is a centralized king.
And it's been fairly peaceful, so there's not a lot of soldiers dying or population decreasing.
Exactly. I mean, the only time you're going to have soldiers fighting is if somehow two factions end up getting sold, they go. But I don't think it's come to that yet. So he's trying to restore the old ways. His daughter is kind of like, she wants to like help restore the old ways, but she sees where the friction is. Well, she's got this uncle. His name is, I can't remember, it's something Farazon. And when Palantir dies, he essentially forces marriage on her and then takes the crown for himself. And so all of the kings that were kind of on the Valar side, they all took the title, what I was telling you, Tar.
Yeah.
If they're against it and they're on the king side, they do R. I know it's a weird, stupid distinction, but his name ends up being R. Farazon. And so he ends up taking the crown in like 3255. And at this point, Sauron has the One Ring. He's dominated a lot of different factions of men, like up to the east of him and everything like that. And he is calling himself the Lord of Men. Now, as far as like, I don't know how long it takes for that to get back to Ar-Pharazôn, because he does have Numenorian settlements in Middle-earth. So I'm sure that gets back to him at some point. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm the Lord of all men. He's like, that's not going to work. So in like 5 years later or 6 years later, he basically takes this massive army to Middle-earth and marches on Sauron. And Sauron's troops see the Numenor army and desert him and run. And the only thing Sauron
Probably
can
a smart move.
Yep. The only thing Sauron can do is he basically drops to his knees. Before he gets captured, he takes on what he calls his fair appearance, like as the elf and everything like that, and basically just drops to his knees and surrenders himself. So they capture him and take him back to Numenor. Somehow, within 3 years, Sauron is now the lead advisor to the king.
Always.
I'm guessing it started out maybe not even on the boat ride there. Maybe even on the boat ride there. They have him chained up below decks. Al-Pharazôn is feeling pretty cocky, walks down below decks, said, I'm the king of all men. Sauron is like, yes, you are. Lets him come back. Maybe takes a few visits down to the dungeon. I think what ends up happening is it was the look that you kind of gave me when I talked about how they're disgruntled about not having immortality. Mm-hmm. So he starts to talk to Al-Pharazôn about that. probably hears him griping. It probably knows that's what his gripe is.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't even need to hear him talk about it. He knows that's the one thing that they don't have that the elves do have.
Mortality.
So he starts to talk to him, and that's how he gets in with his advisor. And then he starts planting the seed, essentially, that the worship of Eru, that's all been a story that's been fabricated and everything. It's 3,000 years later. I mean, yeah, these people lived for a long time. There's a lot of records, but at the same time, that's far enough distance away from, you know, the War of Wrath happening and Morgoth and everything like that, that I think how he establishes it is he's like, Morgoth was just over here trying to go ahead and create freedom for everyone and trying to throw out the powers. And what ended up happening is the Valar came over and reestablished order.
This is
Gave
the
you guys
neo-Nazi shit.
No shit. He's like, gave you guys, yeah, he gives you this island, but then why just give you an island? Why don't you get to go live with all the other elves that they took back and have everlasting life? He's like, you know who can actually help out with that? He's like, Melkor. And he's like, in Melkor, I think you're going to find your salvation. And so he somehow establishes himself as the priest of Melkor. There was in the capital city in Numenor, one of their, I guess, not like symbols or anything like that, but they had this white tree. And I think it was called the Tree of Nimloth. And it was a gift to them from the elves. And what would happen, no, I'm sorry, from the Valar. It grew in the courtyard of the palace.
Okay.
And it would bloom. And the way that the leaves fell could actually tell you how the Valar were feeling toward you or something like that. There's something, but what ends up happening is it's a symbol, essentially has been a symbol of the partnership or, you know, whatever between elves and Valar and men and everything. That gets torn down.
Sort of like a reading of the tea
Oh
leaves.
yeah, that gets fucking
it's
torched.
Just gone.
They torch that shit. Well, Elendil, the guy that was like the sea captain, everything like that, they're part of the faithful. They're seeing all this happen. His son sneaks in before they're able to torch it and takes one of the fruits from it and runs off with it. Had he got caught, he would have been killed.
What was the faithful and the
Kingsman.
Kingsman?
Yep. So then Sauron is made the high priest of Melkor and has them build a 500-foot tall temple to Melkor, where he then has human sacrifices of captured people of the faithful.
Seems like a bit of an ask.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, these aren't willing sacrifices.
A bit of a tell.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Well, what he ends up doing is he convinces Al-Farazon, because he starts getting older. You know, he's getting up there. He might be in his 280s. And he's like, you're getting kind of the end of your life. Do you want to know the secret to immortality? And he's like, yeah, it's not the elves being the elves. It's not the Valar being the Valar. It's the land in which they reside in. It's the undying lands. Whoever lives in the lands never dies. So basically he turns it into, it's something attainable. And so in like 3310, this thing called the Great Armament begins, and Al-Farazon is just like, build me as many fucking ships as you can. We're going to fucking take our immortality. And like 9 years later, sails across with all of the Kingsmen, probably Shanghai's a bunch of faithful people and everything like that, and set sail over toward Valinor. At the same time, Elendil, as part of the faithful, has been kind of gathering like followers and kind of people trying to escape, and is kind of on the other side of the island, I think. And he has 9 ships and fills them with as many people as he can, and they kind of set off for Middle Earth. Sauron stays behind on Numenor.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Armada gets to Valinor, and as soon as they hit land, I think either the Valar or the elves or anything like that were like, hey, Eru, like, the fuck, dude? You gonna let this happen? And Eru kind of like looks down and is like, fuck. He's like, I told him not to go there. So he fucking opens up the ocean, fucking crashes all their ships, and then basically just landslides this entire Numenorian force with mountains, just caves it in on him and buries him. He's like, there, it's done. And he's like, and honestly, guys, I don't want to have to handle this shit again or anything like that. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and make the world round. And then I'm going to make Valinor completely unfindable unless you're an elf. And it says it removes it from the world. Basically, it puts it over the horizon.
Wakanda is it?
Yeah. Except now the flat earth has become the round earth. So, well, what ends up happening is that's not enough. He's like, I told these fuckers not to come this far.
Yeah.
So now I got to take out their home. So then he sends a fucking tidal wave that completely obliterates and takes out Numenor. Sauron along with it, though.
So Sauron was still there and was wiped
His
out
physical
too?
form is destroyed. Remember, it can be destroyed and his spirit can
Live on.
live on. So the spirit heads back from Mordor to reconstitute itself and to go ahead and, develop a new body and everything. The one thing that I'm kind of curious about is if he had the ring with him while he was on Numenor, because then if he can't carry the ring as a spirit.
Yeah, it would have just dropped off and probably been washed away in the tidal wave.
And it sunk Numenor. It wasn't like a tidal wave came and cleared it and the island was still there.
Oh,
it sunk the fucking island.
It just took everything.
Yeah. So it completely took it off the map. So it's not like it can be at the bottom of the ocean and then he can be like, let's send some fishing boats out there to get it. So he probably, and he still had servants back in Mordor. And he had a huge tower. He probably could have just left it there. I would imagine he probably would leave it there.
Instead of being down in Numenor?
Yeah, because if something would have happened, like that's the whole point.
Maybe he didn't get to bring it with him after he was jailed.
If I was, an evil fucking demigod, his whole play here was to get captured because he knew he could corrupt them because he knew what thread to pick at. It was the immortality thread, especially if someone, their ego is so sensitive that him calling himself the Lord of all men made this fucking king come over just to fucking capture him with all these dudes. He probably knew the guy was pretty easy to fucking trick. So, and even if but he had to know at some point, even by accident, or if he got assassinated, the ring would be then on Numenor, and someone could either pick it up and that guy could put it on and have the power or whatever, or it could be lost and he could never find it again. So that's what it makes me think he probably kept it back because he didn't need it's not like he put a ring on Farazan's finger and then was suscepting him to his ring, making him controlled. He just did it through. He also has power, some powers, and everything. But yeah, I think he was just doing it by knowing exactly what to play on.
Just a silver-tongued genius,
silver-tongued devil. So, what ends up happening is because the world has changed. Once Elendil and his two sons, Isildur and Anarion, as their Numenor is getting sunk beneath the waves. Apparently, the Valar were like, we're not going to kill all of you. You guys were cool and everything. So it sends a wind, and the wind basically blows them quickly toward Middle Earth. Well, unintended consequences, it separates them. So Elendil and like 3 of his ships end up going up toward like Gil-galad and Lindor, which is farther to the north. And then Isildur and his brothers end up getting pushed kind of to the south and like toward a river. And that river ends up happening to flow right past like the west mountains of Mordor. And that's where they established their kingdom. Okay. And they call that one Gondor. And then the one that Elendil ends up when he gets up to Gil-galad and all his people, he's like, you guys are cool. Just kind of go inland a little bit and you guys can have this whole area. It was the area essentially that was where like Eregion was. Okay. He's like, we don't want it. Yeah. You guys are cool and everything. Go ahead and just take that over. If anything, too, being smart, that's a fucking buffer kingdom between you and getting attacked by if Sauron does anything.
Just be cool neighbors and we'll give you this area.
That's the thing. But they had never met because relations between them. But like he knew that the Numenorians, essentially the good ones, were probably friendly with them, I would imagine.
They didn't have much of a choice.
Yeah.
Wasn't like they had anywhere to go back to.
Well, and even just fucking as a spirit or not having a body, he still has the ring race, the Nazgul, those guys. Those guys are able to act as lieutenants, fulfill his commands and everything, gather troops. And so in 3320, that's essentially when Elendil and his sons create the 2 kingdoms. So they're establishing forts. They had a presence. Remember I was saying they had some places an establishment before, so they had some people there. They knew like how to build and everything like that. So they end up building the city in Gondor. They build a fort that's in the mountains that are on the border. The mountains that basically border Mordor. Yeah, and everything. They build a fort, a huge fortress there, and this one is basically like this is to guard this way out of Mordor, so we can pretty much stop any of the evil shit from even getting out. And then there's the river that's like 30 miles west of that. They build a city that straddles the river, a huge city that's their capital city called Osgiliath. Mm-hmm. And then about 10 miles, maybe like 20 miles, a little bit further west, there's a big mountain range and a spur that came out of it. And they built this huge city called Minas Tirith. And that's the one that, if you recognize it, it's got the big mountain that comes out like a point in the middle of it. It's like a 7-tiered city. It's basically a circle, semicircles to go around, and then 7 of them that go up.
Okay.
And they build these to basically guard against Mordor, because that's where they know if shit's going to come from. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So you have Minas Ithil, which is the one built into the mountains. That's where Isildur, the oldest son, rules from. Him and his brother kind of share rulership of Gondor, and their dad hangs up north in Arnor. So he's like, you boys handle shit down there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be up here.
You cover that. I'm going to take here.
Yeah, exactly. So Sauron ended up actually reestablishing and building up enough strength that pretty much like 100 years later, he attacks Minas Ithil, the fortress in the mountains, and the tree that Isildur, the fruit that he had got, he was trying to keep Numenor alive and everything, you know.
Yeah.
He planted that in the courtyard of his fortress city. Well, it ended up getting burned, but he got away with like a couple seeds of it. So he ends up getting out and escaping to Osgiliath, and then he escapes over to where his brother's at, and his brother's in Minas Tirith. So that's like the next guard city. So he's like, hey, you got to try to hold this shit back. I'm going to go fucking get dad, tell him what's up. You know, Sauron's back. We need to fucking rally the troops. So he fucking hauls ass up north and, you know, northwest.
Mm-hmm.
And
Trying to get to dad.
Yep, gets to his dad. And in, like, it's a year later. So Gil-galad, Elendil, they get together. They're like, all right, we got to fucking knock this out right now. We can't let him get any stronger. So they form what's called the Last Alliance of Men and Elves. So Elendil, the Númenóreans there, and the elves, they all march toward the mountains east. They meet up with Elrond and Rivendell. 3 years they spend training and making weapons. Fucking running drills and everything like that, getting their army ready to fucking go. They're gathering strength. You know, other elves have to come down from different areas and everything. Up. Yep. They got to build up their strength. They know what they're going against. And they pretty much know that this is kind of their last shot at it. They know he has the ring.
Yep.
And everything. They know what he's capable of. They march on Mordor like 3 years later. And so the only way that's really into Mordor is right at, if you're looking at it like a clock, right at like the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock corner of the square, there's a little break in the mountains. And he built this huge, massive fucking gate. They're called the Black Gate. And then behind that is a little valley. And then behind that a little ways is like his fortress in Mount Doom, where he forged the One Ring.
Yeah.
So they march essentially, the only way in is this gate. So right in front of the gate is this huge plain, and they call it the battle plain. Well, he sends out all of his orcs and everything like that, and the fucking alliance kicks their ass.
Thanks.
Blow through the Black Gate, and they have to... they lay siege to Barad-dûr for 7 years.
Damn.
His fortress is, you know, the size comparisons. You know that tower in Abu Dhabi?
Yeah.
The Burj Khalifa, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
It's taller than that, and it's about 4 times as big, round, and thick. And then, you know, when you see the images of the Eye of Sauron?
Yeah.
Well, he still has his body. He has his body now, but that's where the eye is at the very top.
Okay.
It's enormous.
So it's just the giant plateau almost.
Yeah, but it's a tower.
Devil's Tower kind of looking just straight up out of the ground.
Yes. Yep. But it's got a huge wall and like it's got tiers and fortresses like built all around it. So they're laying siege to this thing for 7 years. Also, this like where they're at in Mordor, because of the orcs, they can't really move in sunlight. That's one of like the bugaboos about them is they can't really move in sunlight. The sun burns their skin.
Yeah.
So the reason that he also chose Mordor is because it had that volcano. He was able to go ahead and cause that volcano to erupt and constantly have it spewing like soot and ash into the sky. And then the mountain range just kind of kept it in. So basically it's a land of just darkness. And so like even the air is just like ashy and it's like a fume and everything. So thinking of them having to lay siege to this place for 7 years and have to like bring in supplies from across the country, just like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And being away from for 7 years, just trying to tear this fortress down
in the darkness.
in the darkness. Well, like 6 years into this siege, Anarion, the younger brother of Isildur, he ends up taking a rock to the fucking head that was launched out of one of like the top tiers of this, and it kills him.
And he was one of the top leaders.
He was the High King of the Numenor.
The son.
He was the son, not the oldest son, but one of the ones sharing ownership of Gondor. So a year later, the battle isn't going well for Sauron. He's been under siege for 7 years. He's finally either strong enough or he's just like, fuck it. So he comes out. And as he comes out, he basically comes out with a force that then backs up and forces like the Elven and Alliance forces and Men forces like back toward the volcano. And so this final battle ends up taking place kind of on the slopes of the mountain. And it finally gets to the point during this battle where kind of the leaders find each other. Gil-galad and Elendil are the leaders of the Númenóreans and, the High Elves. They end up finding Sauron, or he seeks them out. And all of them fighting against each other 2-on-1, I think, like, Gil-galad has this giant spear that he has that's what he fights with. It's a glaive. So it's the stick with the huge, like, scimitar blade on the end.
Yeah.
He ends up taking it to, I think, Sauron's, like, neck and gets him a little bit. Well, at the same time, Sauron grabs him by the neck, and his hand is so white hot that it basically burns him
right through
alive and just like torches him into ash. And at the same time, I think Elendil went to go stab him and push into the side. And at that point, I think Sauron catches him with a mace or something like that. And just, I mean, this guy, Sauron's like 10 or 11 feet tall. And yeah, just crushes him in his armor. And as he falls onto his sword, and it breaks the sword into shards. Well, Sauron goes down, and Isildur is there, and what he does is, to make sure, he goes up and he cuts the ring off of his finger. And as he cuts the ring off of his finger, because his physical form's now destroyed, he turns into a spirit, has to flee.
Yeah.
And gets the fuck out of there.
Can't take the ring with him.
Well, I don't think he took, even if, I mean, Isildur's holding it.
Yeah.
So at this point, Elrond is there. I think he might be the next up tier leader because he was kind of Gil-galad's second.
Right there, right hand man.
Yep. And him and I think another elf leader, I don't know if it was Círdan or not, but basically they see Isildur holding it and they're like, hey, let's go fucking destroy this thing. Like, we can finish this.
Yep.
We don't
Throw
know,
it in the fires, get rid of it.
They don't know, of course, like that all of Sauron's like power is tied to it and everything, and as long as the ring survives, he survives. Because if the ring would have been destroyed, so much of his power was in the ring, the spirit couldn't have survived. The spirit was only 20% of his power. It was just barely able to survive.
It could have never regenerated.
So they try to get him to go to Mount Doom to destroy it, and he's like, no, I'm taking this shit.
Yeah.
He's like, this is my recompense.
I'm the man now.
He's like, my father just died. My brother was just killed a year ago. He's like, I'm taking this. This is my recompense for for all the pain I've endured that this man, that this guy has caused me. So he ends up, they can't force him to do it or anything. They'd have to kill him. And then that causes, that's the king now. That would have turned the Númenóreans against them. It would be civil war between the last alliance and no one would get home. So they have to let him take it. I don't think they knew at that point, like, what all was tied to the ring, because they also tore down the tower but they couldn't tear down the foundations. They couldn't wreck the foundations. He had actually infused the foundations with like power from the ring, and as long as the ring survived, the foundations could. And this comes into play when he starts to try to when he rebuilds and gets his power back. So Isildur, he ends up going back to Gondor, goes to Minas Tirith. I think Anarion's son, he had a son. He was there kind of ruling in his father's stead. He's like, sorry, man. He's like, your pops is gone. He's like, I'm going to hang out for a couple years and show you how to rule. But since I'm now the High King, I got to be up north in where our other kingdom is. That's where my seat is.
I got my priorities too.
But you're gonna stay down here and run some shit down here. So then he has his 3 oldest sons with him. Isildur does. He's had his 3 oldest sons with him, and he took his youngest son, and his youngest son was actually had been left in Rivendell for safety, just in case everyone died, there would still be an heir.
Fallback plan.
Yeah, an heir to the Numenorian throne, essentially. So 2 years after, he ends like, I'm going to start heading north, back to my kingdom. He ends up leaving with his, like, a pretty big contingent. He's the High King. He's going to leave with a pretty good size, large size of troops, and he's heading up north. And he gets to this place along, the Stretch River, and he wears the ring around his neck. And when he had first gotten the ring, he had noticed it had a bunch of writing on the outside of it after it come off of Sauron's hand. And when he was holding it, he said the ring was, it was huge because it had to fit over Sauron's finger. It started to shrink down. He's like, but it lost none of its shape or anything like that. But the writing was red on it, and it was in like a form of Elvish or something.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know what it says. I don't read it. He's like, but it starts to fade. It started to fade, so I'm going to write it down here on this scroll. And he basically details in a scroll his finding of the ring, what happened, his feelings on it, and everything like that. And then he keeps that at Minas Tirith. It's like his journal or some shit, or like his memoirs.
Yeah.
Memoirs.
Memoir.
So as he's riding up north, he's wearing the ring on a necklace around his neck. And apparently the ring still has the power to essentially try to draw evil to it. And so there's still orcs around the mountains and all this kind of stuff that have been hanging out.
Yeah.
Well, it ends up drawing all of these orcs toward him, and they surprise attack all of him and all of his troops. All of his troops are killed. His 3 oldest sons are killed. He takes the ring off and puts the ring on. When he puts the ring on, it makes him invisible and transfers him over to that wraith world.
Yeah.
So he can't be seen, but your footsteps can be seen and everything. He gets it and he runs for the river. He's swimming across the river and he gets about halfway across, and the ring comes off of his finger. And as soon as it does, he becomes visible again. And he, when it came off of his finger, basically, he didn't even really try to go back for the ring. He reached for it a couple times, but then he was like, oh, that's kind of a weight. Okay. And he got back up and tried to swim.
It helped me get far enough away where I can.
Yeah. But he
retreat.
wasn't like, he was kind of obsessed with it, but not enough to be like, oh, it almost felt like a burden was lifted off of him. And he got to the other bank. Well, when he started to get up out of the water, the other bank, he was visible, and a bunch of archers from the other side shot him and killed him. So there goes, that line is only survived essentially by the young son that's over in Rivendell.
And the ring is in the water.
And the ring sinks, and this isn't a small river. It might have narrowed down at this point, but it goes straight to the bottom. It could be moved and everything. Who knows if it's sailed, but this is like, if we're talking distance from the actual, where this empties into the sea, if we're comparing it to the U.S., this thing gets dropped in like Nebraska. Pretty midway.
As far away as you can, almost.
Yeah. It's not going to reach I don't know how it's going to reach the ocean.
Yeah.
But who's going to think to look in there? They didn't know what was causing him to become invisible. They just saw him appear and go into the water. It's not like they were just like, that must be the ring. Like, how many orcs knew that Sauron had a ring?
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
They just knew that he was the leader. They didn't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
All this water talk has me thinking we need a bathroom break.
Okay. All right. That should be our last pee break, I'm guessing, depending on how much longer I drone on. If you're still with us, God bless you, and you're going to be very well informed at the end. I don't know if there's another extremely comprehensive, historically themed, marijuana-themed podcast about this.
No, I bet we're probably tops there.
Well, hopefully.
These things go hand in hand, because I feel like Mr. Tolkien, his mind to wrap just all this stuff into one thing is more vast than I think anybody I can think of.
Looking into this, man, I had what I would consider a very good knowledge of this stuff, but after doing the deeper dig, and honestly, there was some stuff that I did not look into just simply because it was talking about lineages, and it's like playing a RPG. You have the main story quest, and if you do that, you still get the story and you still get all the pertinent facts, but you also get stuff during side quests and side missions and everything that enriches the story. So if I had to talk about that, man, I'd need 50 more fucking index cards and another 15 hours of your time, so I'm not going to subject you to that.
Was it him, or was it more fan fiction stuff?
Him.
So
him and his family. So Christopher Tolkien also has had a hand in this and like finishing his father's works and kind of elaborating on some stuff. But it's the Tolkien family. This is not like the only thing that's comparable to it is, and I think it's broader now, would be Star Wars, and that's just simply because there's been so many offshoots of different characters that have gone on, or invention of different characters that weren't previously established here.
Was George Lucas just the director of Star Wars, or
No, he wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah, he wrote it too. What I'm saying is like there's also been stuff that's been inspired entirely by fan fiction, and there's so much fan fiction when it comes to Star Wars. But
So
like,
that universe was expanded by
other authors and everything like
Yeah.
that too. There's a ton of different
but
authors that have
Tolkien
contributed.
is just
Tolkien.
the Tolkien family.
That's why it's so amazing. Just the depth
Yeah, the sheer
and the
volume.
richness of like everything, and for him just to tie everything back together and weave just all these interconnected stories. Okay, we're getting to the good stuff for you now. So Ring is lost in the river. Mm-hmm. So that's the 2 years after the Third Age starts. Another 1,000 years goes by, and basically during the 1,000 years it's a lot of Kings of Gondor taking place, having skirmishes with other human settlements and stuff, interactions with like dwarves and interactions with elves, and that takes place all over for about 1,000 years. So in Third Age 1,000, this is when we get into the wizards. So they're called the Ishtar, and they're actually Maiar. So it's like the Maiar, but it's letting you know that they're the wizard faction, like the guys that were playing D&D while they were waiting over in Valinor. They were like, let's fucking cast spells and shit. So they get sent over, and who gets sent over initially is Gandalf. I didn't write down what his Maiar name was. The guy that would be Saruman, the White at the time, Christopher Lee, in the historical accurate representation motion picture event. He's kind of the lead, he's supposed to be a little bit higher tier wizard, like white, gray, and then another guy that comes down with him his name is Radagast, and he's Radagast the Brown. He's like a nature dude, so he's like living with all the animals in the forest. He likes to partake a little bit and everything.
Mother Nature.
Yeah, Mother Nurture for this guy. He's got like a bird living in under his hat, like like a little bird nest on his head. He talks to squirrels all day.
Did we get into the
No, that's coming.
Okay.
I'll get to that when it hits. This guy was finding out, he was a wizard, man. He was able to concoct all kinds of spells and potions and everything like that. He didn't need modern cropping. So they arrive. Gandalf is, he didn't want to initially come over. And he was talking to...
Good thing he did.
Manwë. Well, that's why. So he was talking to Manwë, and he's like, hey, some stuff's kind of brewing over there. We're going to go and send some help. We didn't send any help last time and shit hit the fan. We don't want to have to go ahead and all of us go over there again.
Let's get in front of this.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and send over, you guys clean up some stuff. Try to guide them to a solution, basically. And so Gandalf was like, yeah, I don't like Sauron. I really don't want to go. And he's like, that's why you probably should go, because you're not going to underestimate him and everything. So as soon as Gandalf gets there, he basically starts just like making moves of trying to get a lay of the land, finding out where the alliances are, the statuses of everyone, like how the elves are doing, all that kind of stuff. Goes and introduces himself essentially to all of like the elven commanders and all like the kings, everything like, hey, I'm Maiar, I'm Gandalf. They know him by different names and everything. So he's making moves. This is also when the precursors to the best people of Middle-earth, the Harfoots. So the Harfoots are kind of an offshoot or precursor to the Hobbits, and they were more nomadic. They actually traveled. And so this is why it's the first time. They always used to kind of roam the area that was kind of north of Mordor, a little northeast. They would have like a migration pattern that they would travel with the seasons for like food and all that stuff. So they end up, because Mordor's fucking wasteland, and it's affecting all other kinds of shit. They got orcs fucking roaming the lands. They're like, yeah, we should probably get to a relatively safer area.
Probably still dark as could be.
So they cross the Misty Mountains into what's called Eriador. It's where Arnor is and everything like that. Rivendell.
Yeah.
And then that's where they kind of find their way to the Shire. They kind of find this area that's basically kind of protected on certain sides by forests, and then it's just this lush green country.
Most beautiful place on Earth. Or Middle Earth.
So that's when actually they settle in the Shire. At this point, Sauron is hanging out, kind of hiding out as a spirit, And instead of just hiding in Mordor, where I think they kind of have, they have guards there. Basically, they've left a detachment. Gondor mans the Black Gate. They have soldiers living there to make sure nothing escapes. They've taken back over that mountain fortress and everything, and they're using that. So
Nobody comes in, nobody goes out.
yeah, and Sauron can get in as a spirit, but he also can't. If they see any buildup of troops, they're just going to wipe him out. He doesn't have a chance to build a power base. So he ends up going to this place, and it's called Dol Guldur, and basically it's, I'm trying to think in the sense of like our country. If Mordor is Georgia, then he's hanging out in like Illinois, maybe like southern Illinois, and basically at this old fortress at like the edge of this huge forest. And the rest of the forest on like the north side of it is run by these elves called the Wood Elves, and they're kind of like assholes a little bit. So he's hiding out there. Another 980 years go by, and the dwarves that are hanging out in Moria, where all of the dwarves kind of settled under the Durin's people and made that huge city that went from mountain one range to the other.
Yeah.
So they are just fucking crazy digging for minerals and all that kind of stuff, gold, jewels. They find this stuff that's only in Moria, and it's called mithril. And basically it's this metal that almost like emanates light, and it's like light, almost like a feather, but it's like hard as shit. So it's just this mirror, and you can fashion it any way you want. It's weirdly, as hard as it is and as durable, you can fashion it really easily, and you can make chainmail shirts, and they never rust or age, or you never have to take it's just a
It's vibranium.
yes, pretty much unobtainium, vibranium, adamant, whatever you know.
Yep.
Pick your amazing
Your
metal.
super metal.
So they've been just mining this shit as far as they can. They have like a couple seams of it, and they just have to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Well, they end up fucking waking up one of the Balrogs that was fucking hiding out. And the dwarves are like, fuck. So they try to fight it throughout this entire, huge underground city. It keeps pushing it back, killing everybody. It's a fucking demigod. They can't fucking beat it by themselves. And it ends up killing the current King Durin and then also his son Nain. And they both die before it finally just drives them out.
So they woke him up through their mining and everything, and then
He was sleeping down in some cave. They dug too fucking deep down, and they fucking woke him up. So at this point, the dwarves, they actually head kind of like northeast, and they find this. I compare it to it. Always looks like Mount Rainier. Find this one single solitary peak, kind of in a flat area. I know Rainier has mountains around it, but the height, I'm thinking of it.
Yeah.
And it's just, they call it the Lonely Mountain, and they made their home there and dug a huge empire, and then find out it was just fucking filled with gold and jewels and all that kind of stuff.
Good score.
It was a great fucking score. So they, they go in, they name it Erebor, and they call it the Kingdom Under the Mountain. And so basically the next guy in line from Nain or whatever, he got to go and take over kingship, and that's kind of where the dwarves hung out for a while. In 2002, I'm just going to name off some, sorry, this might be kind of boring. This guy named the Witch King, he was basically the lead ring wraith.
In the other world.
No. He's the ring wraith still exist. He's like the leader of them. He's basically what Sauron was to Morgoth. He is to Sauron. He's like his most loyal and like dangerous servant and everything. He's the one.
He's not in the black robe.
Yes, he is. He's just the leader of them. He was like the when he was corrupting the kings of men, he was like the greatest king at the time that got corrupted by the ring.
And aren't they invisible because they like live in another world?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that's why they call them wraiths. So they exist in the shadow world, but that just makes them invisible in ours. They still exist in ours. They can only be seen in that one. Kind of like when, if Frodo would have put on the ring, he becomes invisible, but he can still leave the footprints and move around. So he could disappear in one place, move in the wraith world, and then appear in our world in another. You still see his footsteps and everything.
So he wasn't a ring wraith, but he used it to.
Yes, the ring allows you to
into
enter that.
Okay.
Yeah, to enter that world. So he ends up taking over that mountain fortress again, so they can tell that Sauron's starting to kind of build his power again. And then finally, after a long time, if you go through enough years, even with like the Numenorians having longer lives through like interwar with like other, species or other like factions of men and everything like that, the line of kings for Gondor actually kind of fails. And so then like stewards have to take over. So basically you have this huge long line of basically a guy sitting in the chair next to the throne that's not the king, but it's kind of the king, and probably gets used to having power as the king.
Proxy king.
And then like 400 years after that, that's when Gollum finds the ring. So Gollum started out as this guy named Smeagol, and he was kind of a hobbit. He was
Interesting creature for sure.
Oh, he becomes one. He starts out kind of like Frodo. He's a hobbit, but he's kind of a little bit different. Him and his cousin Deagle, again, creative naming here. At this point in the story,
creativity's already been established.
I was going to say, yeah. Do you think
he gets
at this
a pass
point he's
on
just
Smeagol
like,
and Deagle?
fuck, I'm just going to keep rhyming names. I mean, their parents. What I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They're the parents of them. It was his cousin. Even worse, naming that close to your cousin, man. What was your sibling named?
It's a bad deal.
So he's out fishing. Smeagol's over on the bank. Big old fucking fish pulls Deagle out of his boat and pulls him down toward the riverbed. He opens his eyes and sees something shiny there sitting on the bottom, reaches down and grabs it, swims to the bank. Smeagol has been watching him kind of from behind a tree. Deagle's looking at this ring in his hand and is just like fixated on it. Smeagol sneaks up behind him and sees the ring and just fucking chokes him to death and takes the ring. I think he goes back. No one ever finds the body. I don't know if he tries to go back to like his village, but then he ends up getting, he gets exiled and he just fucking moves up into the fucking mountains to be with the ring.
Yeah, he's got his ring. That's all he cares about.
He's up there just fucking eating fish out of fucking disgusting fucking creeks and...
He's living a life.
Well, he had it for like 450 years. So that's what it ends up turning him into. The Gollum that you know, that's how they kind of figure out that that's one of the reasons that Gandalf wants Frodo to carry the ring. Because he sees how resilient like the species of hobbits are. So yeah, Gollum takes it and it doesn't start transforming him like that. Like normally, like a human man, if they had it, it extended their life a little bit. But once they hit that 200, 250, that's when they faded away and everything like that and became a wraith. Gollum had it for like, I think like 450 years. And so when Gandalf kind of saw that, he was like, oh shit. He put that together later, that's why the hobbits could maybe carry it. But yeah, he didn't even turn into a wraith. His body withered and he turned into like this creature. But how much of that was like as necessity to survive in the mountains and shit?
Yeah, he was in solitude at that point. So living that kind of lifestyle, how many times is he slipping that on and off of his finger just to escape?
So he has the ring the entire time, from 2463 all the way up to like 2941. So he has a long fucking time. He has it so long that an entire kingdom, another kingdom is founded, and it's the horse guys, Rohan.
Yeah.
And then finally, so after Morgoth's defeat, there were a couple dragons. There might have been one or two dragons that survived, and they flew up north to survive. And so they had bred a little bit, and there were still a couple dragons, but they had like this weird fascination with the dwarves because dragons love treasure, dwarves love treasure. We're going to let you go ahead and dig up all the fucking treasure, and then the dragon can come in and take it. So like in 2770, this dragon fucking comes knocking at the door of Erebor, knows how big of a treasure they have. They've got word of it. The treasure room of this place is just massive, massive, massive hall, just filled like a fucking Scrooge McDuck swimming fucking vault times, 100. And there's a city right outside the Lonely Mountain named Dale where men lived, like a pretty big city. And they had really good relations with the dwarves. They traded with them and everything. It was a huge hub up north. Well, the dragon comes down and just instantly torches the town, tries to kill everyone in there. And then
It means business.
Oh, fuck yeah. It knows what's in the mountain and doesn't even hesitate. Busts down the door and just kills a shit ton of dwarves and then gets down into the treasure room and nestles itself down. And all the dwarves have to end up fucking abandoning the mountain. So that's actually, did you ever read that historical book, The Hobbit?
Yeah, I think that was assigned reading in school. History class.
Mm-hmm. So just as, actually we can just fire through this. It's pretty easy. So what ends up happening is after, like, dwarves live 250 years and everything.
Good lifespan.
Yeah. So one of the guys that ends up getting forced out of Erebor is actually there's the king's son, and then his son. So 3 lines of them. They all survive the attack on Erebor. They get out, and basically they're like, well, we don't have any fucking where to go. So they try to retake Moria, what they call Moria now, the underground, undermountain city. It's Moria, the one that the Balrog was woken up in.
Yeah.
So they end up like fighting through a shit ton of like orcs and shit like that, because the Balrog is like, well, you guys are shitheads too. You guys can live here where I live.
Probably draws to them.
Yeah, it's probably like their fucking god. Probably does whatever he wants them to do. So they end up defeating all the orcs, but like literally they get to the door of like killing all the orcs and start driving them into the city. And as they peek through the door, like back in the distance, the Balrog is just sitting there. And they see it and they're like, fuck, it's still here. Like it didn't. And so they have to fucking abandon it. Cause
Yeah,
they know
we can kill all the orcs, but the Balrog's gonna
they
kill
literally
us.
got all the way in there and they saw it and they were just like, fuck. So I think like 100 years go by, something like that. So during that, one of the battles, the king is killed trying to retake it. So his son is next in line. His son ends up disappearing somewhere. And so the third guy in line, which is the king's grandson, his name is Thorin. And so Gandalf starts to kind of get an inkling that Sauron might try to go ahead and get the dragon on his side, which, like, going back to the time of Morgoth, like that one dragon, even the one that couldn't fly, fucking won him how many like battles and everything.
There's a history between dragons and
Not only that, like
Sauron.
one dragon's a huge weapon. Like how hard would it be to take a dragon down?
Yeah.
So
Sauron's a pretty good talker.
yes, you get a little ring around that dragon's finger. I'll put all the rings on his little fucking dragon claws.
Yeah.
Just fucking take over his mind. So Gandalf ends up finding Thorin, and before he finds Thorin, he looks all around for Thorin's dad. His name was Thrain, and looks all around for him. Can't find him anywhere. Finally, somehow gets a hair up his ass that he's like, I wonder if I go back to that Dol Guldur place where I thought Sauron might be hanging out. I'm going to search that place. He goes and he finds Thrain there in a dungeon, and for some reason captured.
Okay.
And so the only thing he can do before he dies, Thrain does, is he gives him a map and a key. And the map and the key is a map to a door that lets you get in a secret way into the Lonely Mountain to Erebor, because the dragon, you couldn't go in the main entrance anymore. It blocked it off and it would hear people coming in that way. And then the key to open it. Somehow, when he was captured, they didn't search him for a key or map.
So anyway, had it in his prison wallet.
That's probably where, yeah.
You're
gonna want to let this map dry out, lay it out flat, and put a heavy book on top of it. So after he gets that, he goes and finds Thorin, and he's like, "Hey, I got an idea." He's like, "I just so happen to have this stuff." And he's like, "Let's take a small group, and let's sneak in. And what we'll do is we can sneak in and like try to kill the dragon that way, or try to force the dragon out. Because if you're gonna march your whole army there of dwarves, they're going to know it's coming way before you get there. They're going to have a chance to prepare. The dragon could just come out and burn you guys from the air." So he's like, "We're going to need someone that can be really quiet to break in. We're going to need a burglar." And they're like, "Okay." And he's like, "I think I have an idea." And because Gandalf had been in and out of the Shire throughout like all of his travels and everything, he had kind of seen how hobbits were, that they were like, if you were a normal person and a hobbit went past you, you almost don't even notice them. They don't hide or anything like that. They're very stealthy and quiet.
Mischievous,
and
stealthy.
Not all of them are mischievous. That's what he had to try to find. Because most hobbits do not like adventure. They only hobbits like a few things. They like farming. They like drinking and making ale. And they like, did I miss the pipeweed thing? They like smoking pipeweed. Which, yeah, I did miss a little bit of that. A while back before before Smog, the dragon, attacked Erebor, over in the Shire, a guy named Tobald Hornblower grows the first pipeweed in the Shire. And he grows it in a place called the South Farthing. So, and then there's also someone that started growing it too, and his last name was Longbottom. So there's a couple different strains. So there's this stuff called Old Toby after this guy. It's like the OG. And then the other one is called Longbottom Leaf.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's why the hobbits are the most just
Yeah.
associatable, race and everything. Like they like to eat and drink and just fucking smoke and like they like to be in their houses and shit. So Gandalf comes in and he's like looking for the right hobbit, and he keeps hearing word of this hobbit that's kind of like strange and like not like everyone else. Like he'll disappear for days at a time or be caught talking to like strangers from outside the Shire and shit. So he goes to find this guy, and it ends up being Bilbo.
Of course.
And
With a name like Bilbo, you're
Yeah.
definitely mischievous.
well, he ends up coming back like 20 years later after kind of initially identifying him, and then comes back when the plan is finally how they're going to get to like the Lonely Mountain and all that kind of stuff, get everything, get the group assembled. It's going to be a small group and get them all together. So he comes back, and Bilbo's kind of like a little more reserved at this point, but he ends up shanghaiing him into this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, during their adventures, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty, but they end up making it to like the Misty Mountains. They go to cross over the Misty Mountains because they're coming from the Shire. They go through Rivendell, cross over the Misty Mountains. While they're over there, they end up getting caught like in this little cavern, and the cavern is actually a trap door into like basically this huge like orc goblin settlement underneath the mountains. And they get forced down in there. Well, what happens is after they get trapped in this trap door, Bilbo ends up going down to another level or falls down this like hole. And when he's down in this crevice, that's where Gollum's been hiding. And how Gollum's been surviving is orcs or goblins that fall down there, he fucking bashes their heads in and then eats them. So when
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, so Bilbo falls down with this fucking goblin, and then Gollum fucking kills it right in front of him. So the ring doesn't really have the ability to like, of course, really move itself or anything, but it has a will. So it's been with Gollum this whole time, but it knows where it wants to be.
Yeah.
So at this point, Gollum keeps it in a little tiny, it's wearing this tiny fucking loincloth or whatever. He keeps it in a little pouch. And so the ring, while he's like moving around, it falls out, and Bilbo finds it. And he ends up escaping the mountain with it. And then at the same time, the dwarves kind of escape whatever situation they're in, and they meet outside the mountain. And Gandalf is kind of like suspicious of him a little bit, like, how did you get out of there? Like, and then you just seem to have appeared like by everything. And at some point, Gandalf gets an inkling that he has a ring, but there were a lot of different, like you were asking me earlier, like, are we getting into the rings? There were rings made that were like called lesser rings, or that had different enchantments on it and everything like that.
They were known.
But the big thing about that too is even before the rings that like Sauron crafted that had like different designs, or they all had a jewel in or something like
There
that.
were magic rings.
There were ones that were made prior to that that were like just little enchantments, like it could make you disappear for a little bit.
Yeah.
And they all were unremarkable. They were just solid gold. So that's why he was kind of like, oh, that's probably just one of those. If he found it in the mountain, like how would it have gotten there?
Just a rando.
Plus, he's trying to get these fucking dwarves to this mountain to fucking take out this dragon. He's got other shit on his plate. So they end up taking back Erebor. Bilbo helps them. There's a big battle when Sauron actually sends some forces up there to try to cut the elves or cut the dwarves off and try to kind of weaken the north so he can also take over that area. Less people to fight against in the war coming up. Gollum ends up like leaving the mountain like 3 years later. For Bilbo to get back and everything, he was gone for about a total year on this whole quest. So after he was at Erebor for a little bit, him and Gandalf actually went back to the Shire together. And then he was already back in the Shire.
So he beat him back.
No. So Gollum had no idea where the Shire, like anything like that. When him and Bilbo were talking a little bit before he escaped, Bilbo had mentioned something about what his name was, and he said Baggins. And then he mentioned something about the Shire. So Gollum had heard those two words.
Okay.
So, but Gollum had no knowledge of what, the Shire was. 450 years earlier, it might not have been called that, or it might have been something different. So he ends up coming out of the mountains looking for the ring. He doesn't know also if Bilbo's even there. So he's just looking all over. Saruman, that wizard that was with Gandalf, he ends up taking up shop at this place called Isengard. It's kind of like a tower that guards this pass between the mountains. And he's kind of doing it under the guise of being like, hey, I'm here for wisdom. If anyone wants to come fucking needs counsel or anything like that. He was part of this thing called the White Council with a bunch of like other major players in Middle-earth.
I'm going to pay it forward.
But really, in reality, he's actually looking for the ring. and he's sending like people that work for him up and down where that river was because he has an idea after doing kind of like hearing stories and capturing people of what might have happened. So he's been searching it all the while during these things called the White Council. The White Council was, there were no black people there, so it was white because it was supposed to be good, but now that I'm thinking about it. So it was Elrond, like Gil-galad, Galadriel, Saruman, and Gandalf. And Gandalf was like, I don't think the ring's destroyed. Like, I think it's still out there somewhere. We should probably be looking for it. And Saruman was like, if it was fucking, even if it wasn't destroyed, like the river would have washed it out to the ocean. There's no way, there's no way to find it. And Gandalf's like, I don't think so. Like, that seems, you're making it seem too easy. So I don't know if he really suspected him, but he's been looking for the ring too. At this point too, Gandalf meets a guy named Aragorn, and Aragorn ends up being next in line. He wasn't, you know how I said when Isildur was heading back up to take over the kingdom after the war and his father was slain, how his last kid was in Rivendell? Well, the one that was running
plan.
Yes. So he ends up being king of Arnor because, you know, his nephew, I guess, is still back in Gondor running things. He didn't die or anything. So that youngest son becomes the king, and then along the lines, that kingdom was kind of destroyed or broke up and everything. And so he was a descendant also of those Numenor guys, so he had the long life, 300 years. So that line was kind of staying intact, where they had that longevity. And the last person in that line was Aragorn, and he had that ring of Barahir. That's how it tied him. That was the ring that way back in the time of Morgoth, that elf Finrod or Fingon gave to Barahir as a sign for helping them and saving them.
Okay.
So that was to mark the lineage of the king. So that's how they knew that Aragorn, he carried that ring. He got it legitimately, and he was supposed to be the heir to the throne of like men, basically. He was staying in hiding, but he also didn't really, it sounds like he was going to do it, but he was trying to like help out like Gandalf had gotten in touch with him, and he was trying to, he knew that being king wasn't going to win the war. He knew that he could help by helping to find the ring and finding out how to destroy it. He trusted Gandalf. So Gandalf was like, hey, we need to go ahead and find out who knows about this ring. He ends up finding, I'm getting ahead of myself. So after Aragorn meets Gandalf, they just establish a relationship, and they're helping each other out. During Bilbo's 111th birthday, Gandalf comes into town because it's a big old fucking celebration. And he had started to have suspicions about Bilbo's ring because after he had visited him like 5 or 6 years prior, Bilbo hadn't aged. He wasn't wearing the ring. It was just like, you know, on his person and everything like that. He never put it on. But just being on his person in his possession, everything, anybody always had to keep it with him in his pocket. He'd grown really attached to it. Just like everyone else that had had it. And so after he saw that, Gandalf was like, fuck, I don't think there's many rings that do that. So he'd started to get some suspicions, and he convinced Bilbo, because on his 111th birthday, he was leaving the Shire. He's like, I'm getting older. He's like, I don't know how much time, despite looking like that, he felt old.
Yeah.
And so he was telling Gandalf, he had set up a plan to where he was going to leave all his shit to Frodo, who was Frodo's parents had previously died. And so he took him, he was like his uncle, and he took him in, and Frodo was kind of like him, kind of odd, and liked to go off by himself and explore and everything. So he was going to leave Frodo all his possessions, and Gandalf was like, well, that should include the ring, right? And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's like, just...
It's possession.
Yeah. And he's like, if it's so hard to part with it, because he kind of had suspicions about it. He's like, no, it's not hard to part with. And finally, like, after like talking to him about it, he didn't let him know what he thought it might be. He just needed to get it away from him, basically. So he convinced him to leave it. And as soon as he kind of stepped away, he felt like a weight had gotten lifted. And then Bilbo hiked off by himself and went to Rivendell, because he'd been there back when he was a young man on his whole quest thing, and he wanted to go back there and see the elves again.
It's like Boca.
It is kind of like Boca, I think, except no one gets old there. So he leaves the ring to Frodo, and after talking to Frodo, making sure he's all squared away, because Frodo just found out by surprise. He's like, fucking Bilbo's gone. He's like, oh yeah, Bilbo's gone. Sorry. He leaves all of his shit.
Got everything.
Yep. And he's like, he even left you his ring. And he's like, why don't you just put it like in an envelope and shove it in a box and just ignore it and everything like that. He's like, just don't mention it to anybody. So Gandalf's like, by the way, I'll be back in a little bit. I got some shit to do. I'm going to go talk to some people. And he leaves for 17 fucking years. And while he's leaving for the 17 years, he gets back in touch with Aragorn. And he's like, Bilbo got the ring from Gollum. We need to find out what Gollum knows about this ring and where he got it and everything. So him and Aragorn basically go across Middle-earth trying to hunt down leads of Gollum and everything. And finally, Aragorn's hunting him. Gandalf's like, I gotta try to find some additional information. He goes to Minas Tirith in Gondor. And like after fucking like years of research down in like this fucking library, finally finds this fucking scroll from Isildur describing the ring. And it just talked to him about how the ring made him feel, and like it's painful for him, but he can't like let it go. And then he was talking about the markings on the ring that would appear possibly if you heated the ring.
The Elvish.
Yeah.
Whatever it is on the
and
outside.
So Gandalf is like, fuck. So he gets back up to the fucking Shire and he throws the ring in the fire and everything, and he pulls it out. He's like, what do you see, Frodo? And Frodo's like, I don't see anything on it. He's like, oh, thank Christ. And then all of a sudden Frodo's like, hold on a second. And he starts to see the fucking words appear. So at that point, Gandalf's like, all right, sit down. This is the one ring. So the time frame here is just kind of crazy, because he basically, like, on April 12th of that year, Gandalf tells Frodo, he's like, you got to get the fuck out of here.
On April 12th, huh? We're pretty specific.
It does say. This is when history starts getting real specific, man, when we're talking about the time frame of this quest. So April 12th, he's like, Frodo, he's like, this is the fucking one ring. You got to get the fuck out of here, and you got to like get somewhere safe, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And so he doesn't end up leaving until September 23rd. So like almost fucking 6 months. When he does end up leaving, he leaves with, Frodo's like 50 at this point too.
Still a striking young man at 50, though.
They look weirdly young at 50, apparently. The other thing, too, is the people he took with him, like Sam. Sam's like 20 years younger than him, and so are like the other two guys, Merry and Pippin. They might be like 10 years or like 5 or 10 years
They're
younger
all
than him.
good-looking lads, though. It's one thing you got to say.
They are,
about
but
the
it makes me
hobbits,
think
they're
that maybe
adorable.
Frodo had a little pull. These Hobbit kids, young Hobbit impressionable men, are looking up to him, and he's like, you guys want to fucking go on like an insanely dangerous mission?
Well, you got to talk the younger generation into doing it.
I don't think
The
took
older
much.
generation's not going to say yes.
Yeah, it didn't take much. So they go through, get out of the Shire. They go through this place called the Old Forest, and this guy named they run into this weird guy named Tom Bombadil, and he's like this weird jolly. He reminds me of like fucking Mardi Gras Santa Claus. Like he's just happy and singing all the time, and he sings songs with his name. And he ends up rescuing him out of some shit, and then takes him back to his house, and he can sense the ring. And he's like, can I see that? And Frodo just kind of is like, I guess. And it like feels compelled to hand it to him, and he grabs it and picks it up, and he's looking at it, and he flips it over and puts it on his finger, and he doesn't disappear or anything like that. And he looks at it on him, and then he takes it back off and just hands it back to Frodo, and he's like, okay. So like it never
He's
explains.
immune.
It never fucking explains who this guy is. But he also has these weird powers, like he controls this valley in the forest where he has it perfectly manicured, and he's married to like this weird fucking like nature spirit.
He sounds like a fun hang.
Yes. So they end up getting out of the forest. They meet up with this guy named Strider, who turns out to be Aragorn, sent by Gandalf to help him. Gandalf at this point has gotten himself captured because he tried to go to Saruman and was like, hey, remember when I was talking about the ring? He's like, I think we found it.
Got an update.
And Saruman's like, you found the ring, you say? He's like, well, fancy that. He's like, I've been talking secretly to fucking Sauron, and I'm just going to fucking imprison you. So I imprisoned him for 2 months. Then he finally jumps off the top of the fucking tower and lands on one of those giant eagles.
Sauron is a very crafty man.
He is,
Gotta
but
give him credit, or spirit, I guess, at this point.
here's where it gets missed here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the even more Cliff Notes version of this. He doesn't suspect that they're going to go ahead and give it to somebody so small and like seemingly insignificant.
Yeah, very unassuming that a hobbit would be the one carrying the ring.
Exactly. And Gandalf picked that strategically because he knew of their, the thing is like So on their journey, Aragorn is able to resist the temptation of it, but the other guy that's with them, Boromir, he's from Gondor. It fucks with his mind. He's like a really good dude, and he's honorable and everything like that. But at some point, during their travels, they come to, they end up going through Moria and everything because it's their only way through. They try to go over the mountains. They lose Gandalf there because the Balrog's there, and they end up accidentally waking it up and everything.
That's a whole issue, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's rough. Gandalf ends up he survives going down the crevice, and he ends up fighting the fucking Balrog and killing it because apparently, despite looking like you're 80 years old, he's a fucking stud.
Badass.
And then he dies from his wounds, gets resurrected as Gandalf the White. Basically, the Valar were like, yeah, we kind of fucked up with Saruman, so we're gonna make you the lead guy. So yeah, get back out there. Get back out there and do something. So they end up, they don't, of course, the Fellowship, the people together with Frodo to take the ring, they don't know that Gandalf is alive again until later on. But they end up sailing down this river to try to get to Mordor. And the reason they're sending in so few people is because if you sent any large number of people, especially with the rumors out there, because the whole reason that Sauron is trying to look for the ring is because he knows the rumors that it's been found. He's been sending his ring race out to find him. If you start sending a big number of troops straight toward Mordor,
Questions will be asked.
he's going to be like, I'm guessing they have the ring, and all I got to do is make sure no one gets through to the mountain for them to throw it in the fire to destroy it.
I need that back.
Yeah,
before
exactly.
it's
You're going to
destroyed.
commit all your resources. So that's why they try to sneak in the fucking A-team, and why they pick such a small group to do it. But what I was saying is the ring ends up just being around it. The ring corrupts Boromir. He tries to take it from Frodo. Frodo escapes him, and him and Sam end up splitting off to go to Mordor and everything because he knows he can't trust pretty much anyone now in the group except his friend. And as soon as that happens, Boromir snaps out of it and is like, what the fuck did I just do? And he ends up dying, defending Frodo's buddies, Merry and Pippin. They end up getting captured anyway. Some shit happens with the Rohan horse people where Saruman tries to fucking kill all of them with a new orc super soldier. And Aragorn goes
So cool, man. Orcs are so fucking cool.
he crossbreeds them and then turns them in. But basically what he does is he fucking does, it's eugenics again, man. He basically breeds the sunlight weakness out of the orcs when he creates the new super ones so they can travel in sunlight too. Yeah. But then he ends up sending almost all of them out to try to destroy Rohan, and they go to their fortress. It's called Helm's Deep. And they basically more than half their soldiers got banished from the land because the king was under the mind control of Saruman. I know I'm jumping around here, but anyway. So all of their cavalry isn't there. They have all their women and children hiding in this fort, and they hold these 10,000 super orc soldiers off
10,000?
just long enough. Yeah.
Holy shit.
They hold them off just long enough for essentially Gandalf, who went off to search for this fucking horse cavalry, finds them, brings them back, and then they charge into him and kill him. So he loses all his super. He all of you go, and he ends up losing them all in
You committed way too many.
one fell swoop. But yeah, Gollum ends up finding Frodo and Sam. Somehow convinces Frodo he's got to trust him, and promises to serve him, to lead him to Mordor to destroy the ring that he doesn't want. Wants all to himself. Sam's back there, the fucking straight rational man, being like, do you not see what's going on here? And Frodo's like, I feel bad for him, Sam. I too carry the ring, and I know what it can do. And he's like, yeah, but he's gonna kill us. He's talking.
Very
He's talking to
impressionable.
himself. He's talking to himself in the goddamn reflection in the water about how he's going to kill us. I've seen him doing it.
Too trusting. Maybe that was the issue. Frodo was just too trusting.
Well, and things work out. Aragorn ends up surviving the battle with Rohan. He ends up going to Gondor and helping save the city. After Sauron tries to attack and destroy it, that causes a distraction enough for Frodo and Sam to get into Mordor, or Georgia. Can you imagine that, man? When you're thinking about that, they get in. It's not just a friendly jaunt to the volcano. It's you get in there and it's hundreds of miles that you're still walking across this fucking.
You can see it, but it's
All you can, and all you're wondering is if fucking some goblin's gonna jump up and be like, surprise, fucker, and just fucking shank you.
Is there going to be some rogue orc that's wandering around here that's going to catch us?
Well, and then they also know that too. And so while like Sam is basically like, at this point, Sam has already saved Frodo because Frodo fucking kicked Sam to the curb. And Gollum, of course, stabbed him in the fucking back and he almost got eaten by that spider. Sam shows up and fucking saves him. When Frodo looks like he's dead, Sam takes the ring so it doesn't get taken. Then after he finds out Frodo's not dead, follows him for 2 days carrying the ring, and then fucking storms a fucking fortress and kills the orcs that are left inside to save his ass.
Frodo is the hero that history wants you to remember the most. Sam...
I mean, Frodo carried it for like, this whole journey took like a year to like, for them to get back. So I think it took like 9 months to get to Mount Doom and do all that kind of stuff. But, and I understand Frodo carried it at that point, but at the same time, man, Sam hasn't had a lot of water and food.
No.
All that food got done. Gollum threw off all their lamness bread or whatever it's called. Sam's hungry too.
There's
and
no
Sam likes to
potatoes
eat. No, not a single one. He still carries Frodo's ass up the mountain to fucking destroy the ring. In the meantime, Aragorn gathers all the remaining men to charge on the Black Gate to fucking create a distraction so all the orcs have to empty out of the land. So then Frodo and Sam have a straight shot. They get there. Frodo's standing there and turns around and looks at Sam with that mischievous glance and says, "It's mine, Sam. I do not wish to destroy it, Samwise." And Sam is like, "Fuck, no. The fuck you're not."
I'm not going to turn, or you're not going to turn the Gollum on me.
No.
I'm not going to let that happen.
Well, no, and at that point, too, he fucking puts on the ring, so of course fucking Sam can't see him, but who can detect him? Fucking Gollum, who's been fucking snaking their asses up the mountain, jumps on Frodo, bites off the ring finger with the ring with it, and then he's sitting there dancing with the ring, and he's happy about it, and Frodo's like, "You just bit my fucking finger off," charges him, knocks him into the fucking lava. The ring gets destroyed.
Yeah, that whole, just the final scenes of the documentary, just, it's like a microcosm of everything else. It's just the selfishness that you see all the way through the story, even before the rings or anything like that. That whole crux just comes to that final destruction.
Most people are very familiar with the documentary film series.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it was easy to kind of gloss over because more people know about that. But yeah, I mean, almost everybody wins. Yeah, there's a lot of dead people, but Aragorn gets the girl. He gets his elf girlfriend. Her dad is like, "Yeah, of course. I know I didn't want you guys to get married, but all you had to do was defeat the Dark Lord, and here you go." It was a similar situation.
It's all yours.
It was a Baron and Luthen situation again, is what it was. But yeah, everyone ends up happy. What ends up happening too that they don't really show some of the stuff is, so Frodo ends up getting to go with Bilbo on one of the last ships to Valinor because he was a ring bearer. They're making a special exception for him, so Bilbo gets to go. And once he gets there, I don't know if once he gets there, he doesn't die. Or I'm not sure how that works.
I'd like to think he doesn't.
No, but he's old as fuck when he gets to go there, so you'd hope it maybe like reverse age it a little bit.
But Benjamin Button.
Yeah, but Gandalf is heading back there too, and some of the elves are heading back, and they're like, "Peace out. Men are going to take over. We're hightailing it back to our paradise world. They're just going to handle what's going on." And then Sam gets back to the Shire, gets the girl he's been wanting for the longest time. They have like 8 kids. He gets elected mayor of the Shire.
That's a good position
or
for
mayor
Sam.
of Hobbiton. He
Hobbiton?
might end up, no, he gets, yeah. Hobbiton is the city. The Shire is like, imagine the Shire being like the state. And then you have like Hobbiton and like different areas.
So he's like the mayor.
He's the mayor of Hobbiton, and then one of the other dudes that went on it, like Pippin or Merry, ends up becoming what's called the Thane. And that's like the governor over the entire Shire. Like these guys come back and are just set for fucking life.
They saved the world.
Well, what they end up having to do actually that is not in the documentary, it got altered in the documentary, is Saruman, he ends up escaping and going to the Shire and fucking like scorching the whole Shire. And after Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin get back, they have to defeat Saruman. And they end up beating him, and then they end up regrowing the Shire and all that kind of stuff and repairing it. But Yeah, Sam is fucking pretty set, as well as all those other guys.
He deserves it.
Then Aragorn and Arwen, his wife, they have another son. I think Aragorn, of course, ends up dying. I'm not sure what happens to Arwen, if she ends up hightailing it there, or I think she might have actually become mortal. She might have actually given up like that Luthien chick did. She might have been able to give that up. But then like his line ends up succeeding and like repairing everything and bringing all the people together. And yeah, I think that's pretty much how everything ends.
I'm just glad that we don't gloss over this part of history. This is a big part of history in our world.
It is. Is it weird that some history is almost more, I'm not going to say believable, but like more enriched than actual history?
Yeah. It's I don't know, I guess the victor tells the story, and this time it seems like it was a good outcome in history. So many other times, usually the victors aren't the best people.
I'm very curious how technology did not develop at any time during this. I understand that's
It's a
not the
long
point.
time.
But like once you hit even a little bit of like technology or advancement, it tends to like accelerate it, and it kind of like accelerates faster than the line. I mean, they had bows and arrows. They had like trebuchets, like the catapults and everything. They obviously had some magic, written words, ability to make armor. I mean, they're medieval,
Yeah.
and everything. I'm just wondering why they stayed, especially with the elves. Like maybe the elves were just like not about that. Maybe it was more like nature shit and building stuff with your hands with like metals and stuff.
Yeah, more of the less man destruction, man killer.
Hobbits probably could have advanced really quick had it not been for pipeweed.
They advanced where they needed to.
They got to exactly where they needed. They were just now trying to invent different strains of pipeweed and different ways to smoke it.
Technology doesn't always equal happiness.
That's true.
Clearly.
Advancement does not guarantee happiness. All right, man. How does it feel knowing that I just kept you hostage talking about this shit for 3.5 hours?
It's so informative. It's just a world that I don't know. I didn't know existed.
What's going to be your reaction just if this one happens to get the most fucking views or most listens, just because it's such like
We've
a
got
relevant topic?
Potential.
You're going to have to start learning about a lot of fictional histories if we're going to have to do this every now and then.
Just histories. This isn't fictional. This is as fictional as the Bible.
Yeah. There's so many. It's without like even me explaining where all the parallels are.
Yeah. You can see so much of, and even events that happen later on in history.
Do you think he read the Bible and was like, there's not enough fucking fire demons and war in this?
You guys didn't put dragons in
There's
these?
clearly not
What
enough
are you
fucking
doing?
Yeah, there's clearly not enough giant fortresses and battles in this. And what? You got one species? It's just men? Yeah. Oh, great. You made woman? Oh, two.
You took a rib and you made a woman.
Yeah.
That's cool. Guess what? You guys mentioned Leviathan one time. I'm creating dragons that can fly and that can't fly.
He's like, you put two of each animal on a fucking boat. I'm going to send an island to take an entire race of people to a magical land. Oh, all right. Well, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and you fucking saucy sluts and scallywags and everyone out there listening to this, thank you for joining Adam on this journey, whether you wanted to or not.
It was a good one. I'm glad we did it.
You're glad it's over?
No, I'm glad that I got to hear it.
Wait till we do Star Wars.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be just as good.
All right. Well, thanks for listening again, guys. Have a good night.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.